He was 16. He had just killed a man, and he was smiling. Evan Mercer sat on the curb outside his mother's house that night, barefoot and calm, while police lights painted the street red and blue. Inside, paramedics worked over a body that would never wake up. Evan didn't look scared. He didn't look sorry. He looked annoyed. When an officer asked what happened, Evan shrugged and said it was self-defense. Said nobody could prove it wasn't. Said it so confidently you'd think he planned it that way. Then a detective walked up holding a tablet. "There's a camera across the street," she said. Evan's face froze. It recorded everything. That camera saw him step outside right after the shot. Saw him check the street for witnesses. Saw him think he was invisible. He wasn't, and that footage was about to destroy him. Stories like this remind us that justice always finds its way. If you believe in accountability, subscribe now and share your thoughts below. This is how it all began. Briar Glen, Ohio, looks like every safe suburb you've ever seen. Neat lawns, quiet streets, neighbors who know each other's names. The kind of place where nothing bad is supposed to happen. But on this night, something did. Inside one ordinary house, an argument turned into violence. Caleb Rourke was 38 years old. He fixed air conditioners for a living. He wasn't perfect, but he wasn't a bad man. He'd been dating Evan's mother, Dana, for 6 months. He tried to help around the house, tried to be a stable presence, tried to connect with Evan. But Evan didn't want him there. Evan wanted him gone. And on this night, Evan made sure he would be. Now Caleb lay on the living room floor. Dana knelt beside him, hands shaking, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. Evan stood a few feet away, watching, not crying, already rehearsing the lie he'd tell. By the time the sirens arrived, he'd practiced it twice. He thought he could control what people believed. He thought the night would protect him. He was wrong. The street looked peaceful, too peaceful for what had just happened. Porch lights glowed soft and warm up and down the cul-de-sac. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. A few curtains twitched as neighbors peeked out, curious about the sirens. But nobody ran outside. Nobody screamed. Briar Glen was the kind of place where people minded their own business, where they assumed the best until they couldn't anymore. Tonight, that assumption died, because inside the Mercer house, a man was gone. And the teenager who ended his life was sitting on the curb like he was waiting for a ride to school. Evan Mercer didn't look like a killer. That's what people would say later. He looked like a kid, tall for his age, but still skinny. Still had that awkward teenage posture. Still wore slides and sweatpants like he'd just rolled out of bed. His face was smooth, no lines, no hardness. But his eyes told a different story. They were cold, flat, the kind of eyes that didn't reflect light the way they should. When Officer Daniels approached him and asked if he was okay, Evan nodded and said, "Yeah, can I go inside and get my phone though?" Not, "Is he alive?" Not, "Is my mom okay?" Just, "Can I get my phone?" Daniels wrote that down. It was the first red flag of many. Inside the house, chaos. Paramedics moved fast, hands slick with blood, voices clipped and urgent. They knew it was too late, but they tried anyway. That's the job. Dana Mercer was on her knees beside Caleb's body, hands pressed to her mouth, rocking back and forth like her body didn't know what else to do. She kept saying, "No, no, no," over and over, the word losing meaning, becoming just sound. An EMT gently tried to pull her back. She didn't move. She couldn't. Her son had just killed the man she loved, and she didn't know how to hold both truths at the same time. So she held nothing. She just shook. Lieutenant Marisol Klein arrived 12 minutes after the first call. She was a 20-year veteran. She'd seen bad scenes before. But something about this one felt different. The house was too clean, too normal. Family photos on the walls, a bowl of fruit on the counter, a jacket draped over a chair. It looked like a place where people lived, not where someone died. But the living room told the real story. blood on the floor, a metallic smell in the air, a spent casing near the doorway, and a body that was still warm. Cline stood in the entryway and let her eyes move slowly. She didn't rush. Rushing meant missing things, and in a case like this, the small things mattered most. She walked outside and looked at Evan. He was staring at his hands, not in horror, not in disbelief, just staring like he was thinking, calculating. Cline had seen that look before. It was the look of someone building a story, someone deciding what to say and what to leave out. She walked up slowly, hands relaxed, voice calm. "Evan, I'm Lieutenant Cline. I need to ask you some questions. Is that okay?" Evan looked up. For a second, something flickered across his face. Fear, maybe, or anger? Then it was gone. He nodded. "Yeah, but I already told the other guy it was self-defense. Caleb came at me. I didn't have a choice." His voice was steady, too steady, like he'd practiced. Cline didn't react. She just nodded and wrote it down. "Okay. Can you walk me through what happened? Start from the beginning." Evan sighed, like the question was annoying. "We were arguing. He got in my face. I went to get away from him, and he followed me. I grabbed the gun because I was scared. He lunged. It went off. That's it." Cline wrote every word. Then she asked, "What did you do after?" Evan hesitated, just for a second, but Cline saw it. "I came outside," he said. "I needed air." Cline tilted her head slightly. "Did you check on Caleb first?" Evan's jaw tightened. "My mom was already with him." That wasn't an answer. Cline noted that too. Across the street, Noah Vickers stood on his porch, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold. He was retired, 63, the kind of neighbor who noticed everything. He'd heard the yelling earlier, heard the sharp crack that followed. At first he thought it was a car backfiring. Then he saw the lights, saw the ambulance, saw Evan sitting on the curb, looking around like he was checking something. Noah had installed a new doorbell camera a month ago. His daughter insisted on it, said it was for safety. He never thought he'd actually need it. But tonight, that little camera had been recording, and Noah had a feeling it mattered. Cline walked back toward the house, her mind already building the case. She paused at the porch and looked back at Evan, and he was watching her, not nervous, not guilty, just watching, like he was trying to figure out what she knew. Cline didn't give him anything. She just turned and stepped inside, where the forensic team was already marking evidence. Yellow placards dotted the floor like breadcrumbs. A casing here, a scuff mark there, a smear on the doorframe that didn't belong. The scene was talking. It always did. You just had to know how to listen. And Cline was very good at listening. The porch light stayed on, as if waiting to be believed. Briar Glen wasn't the kind of place where people locked their doors. It was clean, quiet, the kind of neighborhood realtors called family-friendly. Streets named after trees, mailboxes that matched, an HOA that sent polite letters if your grass got too long. People chose Briar Glen because they wanted predictable. They wanted safe. They wanted their kids to ride bikes without fear, and their biggest worry to be which restaurant to pick for Friday night. Violence didn't belong here. But it had arrived anyway. And now the whole street would carry the weight of it. Dana Mercer had moved to Briar Glen 3 years ago, right after her divorce. She was tired of fighting, tired of instability, tired of wondering if Evan would be okay. The divorce had been hard on him. He'd gotten quiet, withdrawn, started spending more time in his room, headphones on, door locked. Dana thought a fresh start would help. A clean neighborhood, a stable address, a place where they could rebuild. For a while, it worked. Evan made a few friends. His grades were decent. He seemed fine. But Dana had learned that fine was a dangerous word, because fine could hide a lot. And she was about to learn just how much. Caleb Rourke wasn't supposed to be part of the plan. Dana met him at a diner where she sometimes grabbed coffee before her shift. He was funny, easy to talk to, didn't push too hard or ask too much. He had rough edges, sure. He'd been late on rent a few times in his 20s, had a temper that flared fast but cooled just as quick. But he also had the quiet virtues people overlook. He showed up, he kept his word, he fixed things that broke without being asked. After a few months of coffee dates, Dana invited him over for dinner. That's when everything started to shift, because Evan didn't want someone new at the table. He wanted things the way they were, just him and his mom, no one else. Caleb tried, he really did. He asked Evan about school, about video games, about music. Evan answered in one-word sentences or didn't answer at all. Caleb bought Evan a new controller for his birthday. Evan said thanks, but never used it. Caleb offered to help with homework. Evan said he didn't need help. It was a wall, thick and high and impossible to climb. Dana kept saying, "Give it time." Caleb kept trying. But time didn't soften Evan. It hardened him. Every dinner Caleb attended felt like an invasion to Evan. Every laugh Caleb shared with Dana felt like theft. Evan didn't say it out loud, but his body said it. The way he left the room when Caleb entered. The way he rolled his eyes when Caleb spoke. The way he muttered just loud enough to be heard, but quiet enough to deny. At school, Evan was known as smart but distant. Teachers said he had potential but didn't apply himself. He wasn't a troublemaker. Wasn't loud or disruptive. He just existed in his own bubble, earbuds in, hoodie up, eyes down. He had a few friends, but no close ones. People described him as chill or whatever. But beneath that surface, something else was building. Resentment, anger, a desperate need to feel in control. At 16, Evan was stuck between two worlds. Too old to be treated like a child, too young to have real power. And that gap, that space where he had no authority, made him furious. Caleb represented everything Evan couldn't control. A man in his house, a man his mother listened to, a man who tried to give him rules. The breaking point started small. It always does. A month before the killing, Evan got caught vaping in the school bathroom. The principal called Dana. She was humiliated, exhausted. She worked long shifts as a nurse's aide and came home too tired to fight. But Caleb said they needed to address it, needed to set boundaries. So that night, Caleb sat Evan down and told him there would be a curfew, told him respect mattered, told him actions had consequences. Evan stared at him the whole time, didn't blink, didn't nod, just stared. When Caleb finished, Evan said, "You're not my dad." Caleb kept his voice steady. "No, but I'm an adult in this house, and in this house, we follow rules." Evan stood up, walked to his room, slammed the door so hard a picture frame fell off the wall. 2 nights before Caleb died, they had dinner together. Dana tried to keep it light, tried to pretend everything was normal, but the tension was thick. Caleb asked Evan to put his phone away. Evan ignored him. Caleb asked again. Evan looked up slowly, eyes cold, and said, "Make me." The air changed. Dana's hands froze on her fork. Caleb leaned forward, voice firm but controlled. "Evan, phone, now." Evan smiled, not a happy smile, a challenge. He held the phone up, waved it slightly, then put it back down in front of him. Caleb reached for it. Evan jerked it away, fast, almost playful. Dana snapped, "Stop it, both of you, just stop." Caleb sat back. He looked at Dana, then at Evan and said quietly, "This isn't working." Evan whispered something under his breath, too low for Dana to hear. But Caleb heard it. His face went pale. He didn't respond. He just stood up and left the table. On the afternoon of the shooting, Caleb left work early. He stopped at a Chinese place and picked up takeout. Dana's favorite. He texted her, "Let's talk tonight." Calm. "And we'll figure it out." Dana replied with a heart emoji. She felt relief. Maybe they could fix this. Maybe they could get through. She didn't know Evan saw the notification over her shoulder, didn't see the way his jaw clenched, didn't notice the way his hands curled into fists for just a moment before he forced them flat again. Evan went to his room, closed the door, sat on his bed, and something in him made a decision. In a house trying to be normal, something decided it didn't want normal anymore. The evening started like any other. That's what made it worse. The microwave beeped. The TV murmured in the background. Somewhere down the street, a lawnmower hummed. Normal sounds. Ordinary sounds. The kind that make you feel safe because they've happened 1,000 times before. Dana got home around 6:30, still in her scrubs, exhausted in a way that went bone deep. She dropped her bag by the door and saw the takeout containers on the counter. Caleb was on the couch, flipping through channels. He smiled when he saw her. A tired smile, but genuine. "Got your favorite," he said. Dana felt something loosen in her chest. Maybe tonight would be okay. Maybe they'd talk, and it would help. Maybe Evan would come around. She wanted to believe that so badly it hurt. Evan was in his room. Door closed, headphones on, music loud enough that the bass bled through the walls. He wasn't listening to the lyrics. He was just letting the noise fill his head so he didn't have to think. But he was thinking anyway. Thinking about Caleb at the table. Caleb in his house. Caleb acting like he belonged. Evan's hands were clenched around his phone, scrolling through nothing. Seeing nothing. He heard his mom's voice call his name. Once. Twice. He didn't answer. Let her come to him if she wanted him. Let her choose. She always chose wrong anyway. A few minutes later, she knocked. "Evan, dinner's here. Come eat." He didn't move. She knocked again. "Please, just come out. Let's have a nice night." He pulled off his headphones and opened the door. His face was blank. "Fine," he said. Nothing more. Dinner was tense from the first bite. They sat at the small kitchen table, the kind with 4 chairs, but only 3 people. Caleb tried to keep things light. Talked about work, about a furnace he fixed that was older than Evan. Dana laughed, soft and polite. Evan didn't react. He ate in silence, eyes on his plate, jaw working mechanically. Caleb tried again. "How was school?" Evan shrugged. "Fine." Caleb waited for more. Nothing came. Dana jumped in. "He got a B on his history test. That's good, right?" Evan's fork scraped against the plate. "It's whatever." Caleb nodded slowly. "A B is solid. You working hard?" Evan looked up. His eyes were sharp. "Why do you care?" Dana's voice cracked slightly. "Evan, don't!" But it was too late. The fuse was already lit. Caleb set his fork down. He kept his voice calm. "Even. I care because I'm here, because I care about your mom, and that means I care about you." Evan laughed. It was a cold sound, sharp and ugly. "You don't care about me. You just want to control me." Caleb shook his head. "That's not true." Evan leaned forward, voice rising. "Yes, it is. You come in here, acting like you're in charge, telling me what to do. You're not my dad. You're nobody." Dana stood up, a hand shaking. "Evan, stop. Right now." But Evan was past stopping. He was riding the anger now, letting it carry him. "He doesn't belong here, Mom. Why can't you see that?" Caleb's patience finally cracked, not into yelling, into firmness. "Evan, you're acting like a child, and if you act like a child, you'll be treated like one." That sentence landed like a slap. Evan's face went still, completely still. It was worse than anger, worse than yelling. It was cold, empty, dangerous. Dana saw it. She reached out, palm open, voice pleading. "Evan, baby, please, let's just calm down." But Evan was already standing, chair scraping back. He didn't say anything. He just turned and walked toward the hallway, toward the coat closet. Caleb stood up too, instinct kicking in. "Evan, where are you going?" Evan didn't answer. Dana's stomach dropped, and she knew what was in that closet. She'd kept it hidden, thought it was safe, thought Evan didn't know. But teenagers notice everything, especially the things you don't want them to find. "Evan, don't," Caleb said, his voice urgent now. He started moving toward the hallway. Dana screamed, "Evan, stop!" The closet door opened. Evan's hands moved fast. Too fast, like he'd thought about this before, like he'd rehearsed it in his head a dozen times, and now his body just followed the script. Caleb was halfway down the hall when Evan turned around. There was a moment, just one, where everything could have gone differently, where Evan could have stopped, where Caleb could have backed away, where Dana could have stepped between them. But none of those things happened. Caleb raised his hands, palms out, voice shaking. "Evan, don't do this. Please." Evan's finger was already on the trigger. His face wasn't twisted with rage. It wasn't crying. It was blank, like he'd shut off everything human inside him and left only the decision. Dana screamed, and then the world cracked open. The sound was wrong. Too loud for the space, too sharp. It didn't sound like the movies. It sounded like destruction, like something breaking that could never be fixed. Caleb's body jerked back, eyes wide, mouth open, trying to form words that wouldn't come. He hit the wall and slid down, slow, like his body forgot how to hold itself up. Dana's scream turned into something animal. She ran to him, dropping to her knees, hands pressing against the wound, blood hot and slick between her fingers. "No, no, no, Caleb. Please, stay with me, please." Caleb's eyes found hers. He tried to speak. His mouth moved, but nothing came out except a wet, choking sound. His hand reached for hers. She grabbed it, held it tight, felt it go limp. Evan stood frozen, the weapon still in his hand. He was staring at Caleb, at his mom, at the blood spreading across the floor. His chest was rising and falling fast, but his face hadn't changed. He wasn't crying, wasn't collapsing. He was just standing there. Dana looked up at him, face wet with tears and blood, voice breaking. "What did you do, Evan? What did you do?" Evan blinked, like he was waking up. He looked down at his hands, then at the floor, then at the door, and something shifted in his expression. Not guilt, not horror, calculation. He walked past his mother, past Caleb's body, stepped outside into the cool night air, barefoot, and looked around. The street was quiet. No lights flipping on, no neighbors running out. He exhaled slowly. Across the road, a lens kept its quiet oath to the truth. The first responders arrived in waves, patrol cars, an ambulance, then another. Lights strobing blue and red across the quiet houses, turning the suburban calm into something frantic and wrong. Neighbors stepped onto porches now, phones in hand, voices low and worried. What happened? Who got hurt? Is everyone okay? But nobody had answers yet. Just questions and the sinking feeling that their safe street wasn't safe anymore. Officer Daniels was first through the door. He'd been on the force 8 years, seen domestics, seen overdoses, seen accidents. But the scene that met him made his stomach tighten. Dana was on the floor, covered in blood, hands still pressed against Caleb's chest, even though it was obvious. But even though there was nothing left to save, she was rocking, whispering his name, over and over, like a prayer that wouldn't be answered. The EMTs moved fast, professional, efficient, but their faces told the story before their words did. One checked for a pulse, shook his head. Another tried anyway, starting compressions, going through the motions because that's the protocol. But everyone in the room knew. Caleb Rourke was gone. The living room looked too normal for what had happened. A couch with throw pillows, a coffee table with magazines, a picture frame on the wall showing Dana and Evan at a beach somewhere, smiling like everything was fine. But the floor told a different story. Blood pooled dark and spreading. A smell in the air, metallic, sharp, mixed with something burned. The kind of smell that stuck in your nose and didn't leave. One of the EMTs gently touched Dana's shoulder. "Ma'am, we need you to step back." She didn't move, didn't hear. He tried again, firmer. "Ma'am?" She finally looked up, eyes hollow, and let him guide her away. Outside, Evan sat on the curb, still barefoot, still calm. Officer Daniels approached him carefully, notepad out, pen ready. "Evan, I need you to tell me what happened inside." Evan looked up. His voice was steady. Too steady, like he'd been waiting for the question. "It was an accident. Caleb came at me. I was scared. I grabbed the gun. It just went off." Daniels wrote it down, word for word. "Where's the gun now?" Evan gestured vaguely toward the house. "I put it down, on the counter, I think." Daniels nodded. "Okay. And after it happened, what did you do?" Evan hesitated. "Just a flicker." "I came outside. I needed air." Daniels underlined that. "Did you call 911? Evan's jaw tightened. "My mom did, I think. I don't know. Everything happened fast." Lieutenant Klein arrived and took control immediately. She didn't rush, didn't shout orders, just moved through the scene with quiet authority, eyes taking in everything. She noted the position of the body, the angle, the distance from the hallway to where Caleb fell. She noted the spent casing near the doorway, already marked with a yellow placard, noted the scuff mark on the floor. A small thing, easy to miss. But Klein didn't miss things. She crouched down, studied it, took a photo with her phone. Then she stood and walked to the entryway. There was a smear on the doorframe, reddish-brown, fresh. She called over a crime scene tech. "Swab this." The tech nodded and got to work. Every surface, every mark, every piece of evidence was a sentence in a story. And Klein was going to read every word. She stepped outside and scanned the street. Quiet, dark, porch lights glowing soft. It was the kind of neighborhood where people noticed things, where a loud noise meant someone would peek through their curtains. She walked over to Officer Daniels. "Who called it in?" He checked his notes. "Anonymous neighbor, said they heard yelling and then a loud bang." Klein filed that away. "Canvass every house. I want to know who heard what and when." Daniels nodded and got moving. Klein turned her attention to Evan. He was still on the curb, scrolling through his phone now. Scrolling. Like nothing had happened. Like his mother wasn't inside, covered in her boyfriend's blood. Klein's expression didn't change. But inside, a switch flipped. This wasn't grief. This was performance. She walked up slowly, hands relaxed, voice calm. "Evan, I'm Lieutenant Klein. I know you already talked to Officer Daniels, but I need to ask you a few more questions. Is that okay?" Evan looked up, face neutral. "Sure." Klein sat down on the curb a few feet away. Not too close, not threatening, just two people talking. "Tell me what happened tonight. Start from the beginning." Evan sighed like the question was tedious. "We were eating dinner. Caleb started getting on me about school, about respect, whatever. I got up to leave and he followed me, got in my face. I felt threatened." Klein nodded, writing. "Threatened how?" Evan shrugged. "He was yelling, coming toward me. I didn't know what he was going to do." Klein paused, looked at him. "So you got the gun?" Evan nodded. "Yeah, for protection." Klein wrote that down. "And then what?" Evan's voice stayed flat. "He lunged. I pulled the trigger. It happened so fast." Klein let silence sit for a moment. Then she asked the question that mattered. "After the gun went off, what did you do?" Evan blinked. I don't know. I think I just stood there." Klein tilted her head slightly. "You told Officer Daniels you came outside." Evan's eyes flicked away for a second. Yeah, I did. I needed air. Klein kept her tone even. Did you check on Caleb first? Evan's hands tightened slightly. My mom was already there. She was screaming. I couldn't. I just needed to get out. Klein nodded slowly, wrote it all down, every word, every hesitation, every detail that didn't quite line up. She thanked him and stood, walked back toward the house. But her mind was already working. His story had holes, and holes got bigger under pressure. Across the street, Noah Vickers stood on his porch, arms crossed, watching everything. He'd lived in Briar Glen for 15 years, knew every family on the block. He'd always thought the Mercers were quiet, polite. Dana waved when she saw him. Evan never did, but that was just teenagers. Tonight changed everything. He'd heard the yelling earlier, heard it clearly because his window was open. Then came the bang, sharp, unmistakable. He'd looked out and seen a figure step onto the Mercers' porch, barefoot, pausing, looking around, then going back inside. Noah's new doorbell camera had been recording the whole time. He hadn't thought much of it until now. But watching the police move through the scene, watching that kid sit on the curb like nothing was wrong, Noah knew. He walked down his driveway and flagged down an officer. I think I have something you need to see. The scene was cleaned for blood, but it couldn't be cleaned for truth. Lieutenant Klein didn't sleep that night. She didn't go home. She sat in her office at the station, door closed, coffee going cold on her desk, building the case brick by brick. The first 24 hours mattered most. Evidence degraded, memories shifted, stories got rehearsed. She needed to move fast, but carefully. She made a list, secure all devices, canvass neighbors, formal interviews, preserve video, rush the lab on key items. She worked methodically because panic wasted time, and time was the one thing she couldn't get back. Or Evan Mercer was 16, legally a minor, but the harm he caused wasn't minor. The law would have to decide which version of him mattered more, the boy or the killer. Klein's job was to make sure the truth didn't get lost in that debate. Dana was brought to the station just after midnight. She looked like a ghost, pale, shaking. Her hands were still stained, despite scrubbing them in the bathroom at home. She couldn't get the blood out from under her nails, couldn't stop seeing Caleb's face, couldn't stop hearing the sound. She sat in the interview room, arms wrapped around herself, eyes unfocused. Klein entered quietly, set down 2 bottles of water, and sat across from her. Dana, I know tonight has been unimaginable, but I need you to walk me through what happened. Can you do that? Dana nodded, but it took her a long moment to find words. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. It happened so fast. They were arguing. Evan went to the hallway. Caleb followed. I heard the shot. I ran. Caleb was on the floor. There was so much blood. Klein took notes, her pen moving steadily. Before the shot, did Caleb threaten Evan in any way? Dana shook her head. No, Caleb wouldn't. He was trying to talk to him, trying to calm him down. Klein leaned forward slightly. Dana, I need you to think carefully. When Evan went to the hallway, where was Caleb? Dana closed her eyes, tried to picture it. He was following, but he wasn't close. He was a few feet back. He was saying, Evan, don't. Like he knew, like he saw what Evan was going to do. Klein underlined that. Oh, so Caleb was backing away? Dana opened her eyes. The realization hit her slowly, painfully. Yes, he wasn't lunging. He was backing away. Her voice cracked. Oh, God. He was backing away. Klein let the silence hold the weight of that admission. Then she asked the hardest question. Dana, did Evan say anything after? Dana stared at the table. Her hands trembled. He told me to say it was an accident. Told me to say Caleb lunged at him. He said if I didn't, I'd lose him too. Klein's pen stopped. He asked you to lie. Dana's face crumpled. Tears came hard and fast, the kind that hurt. He's my son. He's my baby. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to lose him. Klein's voice softened, but only slightly. Dana, I understand. But Caleb was a person, and he deserves the truth. Dana sobbed into her hands. I know. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Klein gave her a moment. Then she continued. The interview lasted 2 hours. Every word mattered. Evan's formal interview came next. He was brought into a different room, sat in a chair that was too big for him, making him look younger than he was. His public defender sat beside him, a woman named Clara Finch, who looked tired and overworked. Klein entered with a folder and a calm expression. She sat down and read Evan his rights again, even though he'd already been Mirandized. Do you understand these rights? Evan nodded. Yeah. Klein opened the folder. Evan, I want to give you a chance to tell your side. Walk me through what happened tonight. Evan repeated the same story, word for word. Caleb got aggressive. He felt threatened. The gun went off. It was self-defense. His voice stayed flat, emotionless, like he was reading from a script he'd memorized. Klein didn't interrupt. She let him finish. Then she asked, Why did you go outside after the shot? Evan shifted in his seat. I told you, I needed air. Klein nodded. Did you check the street? Evan's eyes narrowed. What? Klein repeated, slower. When you went outside, did you look around? Check if anyone was watching? Evan hesitated. His lawyer leaned in and whispered something. Evan shook his head. No, I just stood there. Klein made a note. How long were you outside? Evan shrugged. I don't know. A minute, maybe 2. Klein looked up. And in that time, you didn't think to call for help? Didn't think to check on Caleb? Evan's jaw tightened. My mom was handling it. Klein let that answer hang in the air. It sounded worse every second. Archie shifted gears. Evan, how did you know where the gun was? He blinked. What do you mean? Klein kept her tone even. The lockbox. It was in the coat closet. How did you know it was there? Evan's face stayed blank, but his hands clenched slightly. I saw my mom put it there a while ago. I remembered. Klein nodded. So you knew where it was. You knew how to get to it? And in the middle of an argument, you went straight to it. Evan's lawyer interrupted. Lieutenant, are you accusing my client of premeditation? Klein didn't look at her. She kept her eyes on Evan. I'm asking questions, trying to understand. Evan leaned back, arms crossed. I was scared. That's it. I didn't plan anything. Klein wrote that down, the word plan underlined twice. While the interviews were happening, a tech team was working on Evan's phone. They'd seized it at the scene, along with Dana's phone and Caleb's. Phones were gold mines. People documented everything, texts, searches, photos, app activity. Evan's phone showed recent deletions, messages erased, maybe an app uninstalled. The tech, a guy named Martinez, ran recovery software. It would take time, but deleted didn't mean gone. It just meant hidden, and hidden things had a way of surfacing when you knew where to look. Martinez flagged something interesting. A message draft created at 9:47 p.m. Minutes after the shooting, the content wasn't fully recovered yet. But the timestamp was there. Proof that Evan had been typing something, thinking something, right after Caleb hit the floor. The canvas results started coming in. Neighbors talked, some reluctantly, some eagerly. A woman 3 houses down said she'd heard yelling that night. Said it wasn't the first time either. Said the Mercer house had been tense for weeks. A man across the street, Noah Vickers, said he heard the shot clearly. Said he saw someone step outside right after. Couldn't see the face, but the build matched Evan. And then there was the camera. Noah handed over access to his doorbell footage voluntarily. No warrant needed. He walked the officer through how to download it. "I just installed it last month," he said. "Didn't think I'd ever need it." The officer thanked him and brought the file back to the station. Klein took custody personally. She documented every step. Chain of custody mattered. Defense lawyers love to attack video. She wasn't giving them an opening. Late that night, Klein sat alone in the evidence room and played the footage for the first time. The screen was small, the image grainy. Black and white night vision. The timestamp in the corner read 9:43 p.m. For a few seconds, nothing, just a quiet street. Then faintly, a sound. Muffled. Could be a shout. Could be a door. Then louder, a crack, sharp, unmistakable. A few seconds later, motion triggered the camera. A figure stepped out onto the Mercers' porch. Barefoot, paused, head turned left, then right. Scanning. The figure stood there for maybe 10 seconds, then turned and went back inside. Klein replayed it, froze it, zoomed in as much as the resolution allowed. The figure's height matched Evan, the build matched, the bare feet matched, and the behavior, that slow, deliberate scan of the street, that wasn't panic. That was checking. He thought he erased words. He only erased comfort. Klein called a meeting the next morning. Small room, 4 people, herself, ADA Lynn Park, a digital forensics analyst, and a senior detective named Rousseau. The footage was loaded on a laptop, ready to play. Park arrived with her briefcase and a notepad already half full. She was sharp, didn't waste words, didn't play games. If the case was strong, she'd prosecute. If it wasn't, she'd tell Klein what was missing. She sat down, took a sip of coffee, and said, "Show me." Klein hit play. The room went quiet. All eyes on the screen. The grainy image, the timestamp, the crack of sound. Then the figure, stepping out, pausing, looking. The footage was only 18 seconds long, but those 18 seconds changed everything. Park watched it twice, then a third time. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, thinking. "Can we identify him definitively?" Klein nodded. "Height and build match. Bare feet match the mud trace we found on his heel at booking. And there's this." She played it again, pausing at a specific frame. The figure's hand was raised to his mouth, a nervous gesture. Evan bites his knuckle when he's anxious. School resource officer confirmed it. There's video of him doing it during a meeting last semester. Park made a note. "What about the timeline?" Rousseau pulled out his notes. Neighbor called 911 at 9:46. Footage shows motion at 9:43. Matches Evan's own statement that he went outside right after the shot. The analyst spoke up. "The file's clean. No edits. No tampering. Metadata checks out. Original is on the cloud. A chain of custody is solid." Park nodded slowly. She wasn't smiling, but there was a glint in her eyes. The glint prosecutors get when a case stops being theory and becomes proof. This is good, really good, but we need more. Defense will argue it's grainy, that it could be anyone. What else do we have? Klein opened her folder. Gunshot residue on his clothing. Positive indicators. Scene reconstruction shows Caleb was backing away, not lunging. Dana's statement contradicts Evans. And we're waiting on phone forensics. He deleted something right after the shooting. We're recovering it now. Park tapped her pen against her notepad. Motive? Klein nodded. Escalating conflict over the past month. Witnesses say Evan resented Caleb, made threats, told a friend he's not staying. We've got screenshots. Park leaned forward. Good. Charge him. Aggravated murder. Move for bindover to adult court. The age will be an issue, but the evidence supports it. This wasn't impulse. This was intent. Rousseau frowned. He's 16. Judge might push back. Park's expression didn't change. He's 16, and he killed a man. Then check the street for witnesses. That's awareness. That's accountability. We argue it. Let the judge decide. Klein closed her folder. I'll draft the affidavit. Park stood. Do it fast. I want him in custody on the upgraded charge by end of day. While the meeting was happening, Evan was at his aunt's house. Temporary placement. Dana wasn't allowed to be alone with him per child services. His aunt, Linda, was doing her best. But she didn't know what to say, didn't know how to look at him. This was the boy she used to babysit, on the kid who loved dinosaurs and mac and cheese. Now he was a suspect in a killing. She made him breakfast. He barely touched it, just scrolled on his phone. She tried to talk. Evan, honey, are you okay? He didn't look up. I'm fine. She sat down across from him. You know you can talk to me, right? He finally looked up. His eyes were cold, empty. There's nothing to talk about. It was self-defense. Everyone's overreacting. Linda felt a chill, not from fear, from recognition. He believed what he was saying, truly believed it, or at least he'd convinced himself. She tried again. Evan, a man is gone. Caleb is gone. Don't you feel anything? Evan's jaw tightened. He shouldn't have pushed me. Linda's hand shook. She stood up and walked to the kitchen, gripping the counter. She pulled out her phone and texted Dana. I don't know if I can do this. He's not the same. Dana didn't reply. She was sitting in her living room staring at the spot where Caleb died. She hadn't moved in hours. The floor had been cleaned by a service, but she could still see it. The stain was gone, but the memory wasn't. It would never be gone. That afternoon, Evan posted on social media. Just a vague story. No details. Just a black screen with white text. People believe anything. SMH. It stayed up for an hour before his lawyer saw it and called Linda in a panic. Take his phone, now. He can't be posting. Linda confronted Evan. He rolled his eyes. It's not about the case. Chill. She held out her hand. Phone. Now. He sighed dramatically, like she was being unreasonable, and handed it over. But the damage was done. Screenshots had already spread. Our classmates shared it, neighbors saw it, and someone sent it to the police. Klein saw it and added it to the file. Another piece, another window into who Evan really was. Not grieving, not remorseful, arrogant, defiant, convinced he'd win. The phone forensics came back late that afternoon. Martinez walked into Klein's office holding a printed report. You're going to want to see this. Klein took it and read quickly. The deleted message draft had been partially recovered. It read, I think he's... Then it stopped. A second draft created moments later. I didn't mean... Also incomplete, but the pattern was clear. Evan had been typing something, trying to explain, trying to control the narrative. And then he'd stopped. Deleted it. Decided silence was safer. Klein looked up. Can we recover more? Martinez shook his head. That's all we got. But the timestamps are solid. 9:47 and 9:48, right after the shooting. Klein nodded. Good. That's enough. By late afternoon, the arrest warrant was signed. Upgraded charges, aggravated murder, use of a firearm in commission of a felony. Klein and two officers drove to Linda's house. Evan was in the living room watching TV when they knocked. Linda opened the door. Her face fell when she saw Klein. Is this? Klein nodded. We have a warrant for Evan's arrest. Linda stepped aside, tears already starting. Klein walked in. Evan looked up from the couch, confused. What's going on? Klein kept her voice calm and professional. Evan Mercer, you're under arrest for aggravated murder. Stand up and put your hands behind your back. Evan's face twisted. This is stupid. I already told you it was self-defense. Klein didn't argue. She just cuffed him, read him his rights. Again. Evan kept talking. "You can't prove anything. You don't have anything." Klein led him outside. Neighbors were watching from their porches. Phones out, recording. Evan's face flushed red, not from shame, from anger. He hated being seen like this, hated the loss of control. Klein opened the patrol car door and guided him inside. As she closed it, she leaned down slightly. "Evan, we have a camera from across the street. It caught you on the porch, right after the shot." Evan's face went pale. His mouth opened, then closed. He stared at her, searching for a lie, finding none. Klein stepped back and shut the door, walked to her car, didn't look back. Inside the patrol car, Evan sat in silence. His hands were shaking now. And not from fear, from rage, from the realization that the story he built was collapsing. The camera didn't blink. The story did. Investigators didn't need a psychology degree to see the pattern. Evan Mercer wasn't a kid who snapped in a moment of fear. He was a kid who'd been building toward this for months, maybe years. The signs were everywhere once you knew where to look. Entitlement, hypersensitivity to criticism, a desperate need to control his environment, and beneath it all, a belief that rules didn't apply to him the same way they applied to everyone else. Klein had seen it before, different faces, different circumstances, but the core was always the same. Some people believed consequences were suggestions. Evan was one of them, and that belief had cost Caleb Rourke his life. Caleb represented everything Evan couldn't tolerate. An outsider with keys, a man who had his mother's attention, a voice that challenged his authority in a house where Evan believed he should be in charge. Every rule Caleb tried to enforce felt like an attack. Every boundary felt like humiliation. To Evan, it wasn't about a curfew or a phone. It was about power, about who got to decide. And when Caleb made it clear that Evan wasn't the one making decisions, something in Evan broke. Or maybe it didn't break. Maybe it just revealed what had always been there. A willingness to remove obstacles, to win at any cost. Even if the cost was a human life. Detectives combed through Evan's digital footprint. Social media posts, group chats, private messages. The picture that emerged was carefully curated. Evan posted memes about being unbothered, captions about handling problems, videos where he stared at the camera with a blank expression, trying to look tough, trying to look untouchable. His friends egged him on in the comments. Cold. Savage. Legend. It was performative, but it was also revealing. Evan didn't just want to be in control. He wanted people to see him as someone who couldn't be controlled, someone who didn't care what anyone thought. The irony was that he cared desperately. Every post was proof of that. One message stood out, sent to a friend 2 weeks before the shooting. "If he touches my stuff again, I swear I'll make him regret it," the friend replied with a laughing emoji, treated it like a joke. Evan replied, "I'm not playing." The friend didn't respond after that. During the investigation, that friend was interviewed. He admitted he thought Evan was just venting, just being dramatic the way teenagers are. He never thought Evan would actually do something. But looking back, he said, there was always something off about Evan, something that made you not want to push him too far. He didn't get mad loud, the friend said. He got mad quiet, and that was worse. The relationship between Evan and his mother was complicated. Dana loved her son. That was never in question. But love doesn't mean understanding, and it doesn't mean control. Evan had learned early that his mother would bend if he pushed hard enough, would soften if he stayed silent long enough. He'd learned to weaponize her guilt, the divorce, her long hours, the instability. He used it all, not consciously maybe, but effectively. When Caleb entered the picture, that dynamic shifted. Suddenly, Dana had someone else to consider, someone else to prioritize. Evan couldn't manipulate Caleb the way he manipulated his mother. Caleb didn't carry the same guilt, didn't have the same soft spots, And that made him dangerous, not physically, psychologically. Dana visited Caleb's mother a week after the arrest. She didn't call first, just showed up, stood on the porch, shaking, unable to knock. Renee Rourke opened the door and found her there. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. Then Dana broke. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Her voice cracked on every word. Renee's face was stone. Grief had hardened her. "Why are you here?" Dana's hands twisted together. "I don't know. I needed to say it. To your face. Caleb didn't deserve this. He was good. He was trying." Renee's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. "He called me the day before, said he was going to make it work, said he loved your son, even after everything. He loved him." Dana collapsed onto the porch steps, sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe. "I didn't know. I didn't know Evan would. I never thought." Renee stood in the doorway, arms crossed, holding herself together. "You're his mother. How did you not see it?" Dana looked up, face wet and broken. "I saw anger. I saw resentment. I didn't see this. I didn't see murder." Renee's voice dropped to a whisper. "Well, now we both have to live with it." She stepped back inside and closed the door. Gently, not a slam, just a closing. Final. Dana sat on those steps for 20 minutes. Then she got in her car and drove home. She didn't remember the drive, didn't remember unlocking the door. She just found herself standing in the living room again, staring at the floor, the place where everything ended. Back at the station, Klein was preparing for Evan's next interview. This one would be different, strategic. She would introduce the camera without showing it. Let him react. Let him scramble. People revealed themselves when they were cornered, when they realized their story had holes. Evan thought he was smart, thought he could talk his way out. Klein had dealt with smart suspects before. Smart didn't mean careful. Smart often meant overconfident, and overconfidence led to mistakes. She reviewed his previous statements, noted the inconsistencies, the timeline gaps, the emotional flatness. She built a map of his lies, and now she was going to walk him through it, step by step, until he had nowhere left to go. Late that night, a forensic analyst sent Klein an email. Subject line, "You need to see this." Attached was a screenshot of Evan's search history recovered from his phone. The searches were time-stamped at 2:14 a.m. the night of the killing, hours after the arrest. How long does GSR stay on clothes? Juvenile Sentencing Ohio. Can police recover deleted texts? Evan had been researching, looking for loopholes, trying to figure out what evidence could hurt him and how to explain it away. Klein read through the list twice. Then she leaned back in her chair and allowed herself a small, grim smile. Evan thought his phone was private, thought it was a tool. It was, just not the kind he thought. In the dark, he looked for loopholes. Morning brought receipts. The medical examiner's report arrived 3 days after the shooting. 12 pages. Clinical, precise, every measurement documented, every observation recorded. Dr. Sarah Mendez had been doing this work for 18 years. She didn't editorialize, didn't speculate. She just reported what the body told her. And Caleb Rourke's body told a clear story. The wound path was consistent with a shot fired from several feet away. Not close quarters, not a struggle. The angle suggested the shooter was standing relatively still. The victim showed defensive posturing, hands partially raised, body turning away. Classic indicators of someone trying to retreat, not attack. Klein read the report twice, highlighted key sections. This wasn't chaos. This was a deliberate act. The scene reconstruction came next. A team of analysts worked methodically. They measured distances, angles, sight lines. They used lasers and markers and detailed photographs. They mapped where Caleb stood when he was shot, where the casing landed, where Dana was positioned, where Evan must have been based on trajectory. The results matched the medical examiner's findings. Caleb had been backing toward the wall, 4 feet from Evan, maybe 5, not lunging, not charging, backing away. The only way Evan's "he came at me" story worked was if physics stopped applying, and physics didn't care about 16-year-olds with good lawyers. Physics just was. The gunshot residue results were stronger than Klein hoped. Particles found on Evan's sleeves, on the front of his shirt, consistent with being near a discharge. The lab tech explained it carefully. GSR wasn't definitive alone. Could be transfer, could be contamination. But paired with everything else, it mattered. It put Evan at the scene. Put him close to the weapon. Defense would argue Dana could have transferred it when she touched him. Prosecution would argue the pattern didn't support that. The particles were concentrated, specific, not the kind of smear you'd get from a hug. Klein added the report to her growing file, another brick in a wall that was getting harder to climb. The footprint evidence was quieter, less dramatic, but persuasive in its simplicity. Crime scene techs had photographed the muddy print near the porch, compared it to Evan's bare feet at booking. The size matched, the shape matched, but more than that, the wear pattern matched. Evan's right heel had a specific callus, visible in the booking photos, visible in the print. It was the kind of detail juries understood. Everyone had looked at their own footprint before, and everyone knew how unique they were. Defense could argue coincidence, could argue someone else with similar feet. But it was a hard sell, especially when the print was photographed minutes after the shooting. Fresh, wet, undeniable. The phone extraction was nearly complete. Martinez had been working around the clock, recovering fragments, rebuilding timelines. The deleted message drafts were just the beginning. He found app activity, searches, location data. One detail jumped out. At 9:52 p.m., 7 minutes after the neighbor called 911, Evan had opened a messaging app, typed something, then deleted the entire conversation thread. The recipient was a friend from school. The content was gone. But the action remained. Why delete a conversation minutes after a shooting unless you'd said something you shouldn't have? So Martinez flagged it, sent it to Klein with a note. This kid was cleaning up his trail in real time. Other evidence emerged from the canvas. A neighbor 2 houses down had doorbell audio, not video, just sound. It captured the argument, muffled but audible. Caleb's voice raised. "Evan, stop!" Then Dana screaming, "Evan, don't!" Then the shot. Then silence. The audio was time-stamped. 9:42 p.m., 1 minute before the motion-triggered video across the street. The timeline was locking into place. Every piece confirmed the next. No gaps, no contradictions, just a sequence of events that led from anger to violence to cover-up. Klein listened to the audio 3 times. Each time, Dana's scream hit harder, the desperation in it, the knowledge in it. She knew what was about to happen, and she couldn't stop it. Text messages between Evan and his friends painted a picture of escalation. One thread from a week before the shooting stood out. Evan had written, "I hate him. He's ruining everything." A friend replied, "Just ignore him, bro." Evan wrote back, "I can't. He's always there, always in my face. I'm done." Another friend chimed in, "What are you going to do?" Evan didn't respond for an hour. Then he wrote, "Whatever I have to." The friends treated it like tough talk, teenage posturing, but prosecutors would present it differently, as evidence of intent, of planning, of a mind moving toward violence, not away from it. The final piece came from the weapon itself. Ballistics confirmed the casing and projectile matched. No surprise there. But the gun's history mattered. Dana had purchased it legally 5 years earlier, after the divorce. She'd taken a safety course, kept it locked, told Evan it was there for emergencies only, never to be touched. Evan had touched it anyway. The lockbox showed no signs of forced entry. It had been opened with the key. Dana confirmed she kept the key in a small dish on her closet shelf. Hidden, she thought. But Evan had known, had watched, had waited. Premeditation was hard to prove, but knowledge was easier, and knowledge paired with action painted a damning picture. A D.A. Park reviewed everything in her office, spread the reports across her desk like puzzle pieces. Medical examiner, scene reconstruction, GSR, footprint, phone data, witness statements, audio, text messages, video. Each piece alone could be challenged. Together they told a story defense couldn't rewrite. She called Klein. "We're ready. File the motion for adult court. I want a preliminary hearing as soon as the judge allows." Klein agreed. "What about the video? When do we use it?" Park thought for a moment. "Not yet. Let him think we're bluffing. Let his lawyer build a defense around the idea we don't have much. Then we play it. In court, in front of the jury, let them see his face when he realizes we've had it all along." That night, Klein sat in her car outside the station, engine off, hands on the wheel. She thought about Caleb, about Dana, about Evan, about how a normal night in a normal house had turned into this: a case file, a court battle, a family destroyed. She thought about the footage, that 18-second clip that would define everything. Evan stepping out, checking the street, believing he was invisible. She started the car and drove home. Tomorrow they'd move to the next phase. And tomorrow the case would shift from investigation to prosecution. Tomorrow Evan would start to understand what accountability looked like. Science doesn't get angry. It just keeps being right. The second arrest happened on a Thursday morning. Gray sky, cold wind. The kind of morning that felt like the world was holding its breath. Evan was at his aunt's house, eating cereal in front of the TV, when the knock came. 3 sharp raps, official, final. Linda opened the door, and her stomach dropped. Lieutenant Klein stood there with 2 uniformed officers. No smile, no small talk, just business. "We have a warrant for Evan's arrest. Upgraded charges." Linda's hand went to her mouth. She stepped aside without a word. Klein walked in, eyes sweeping the room, landing on Evan. He looked up from the couch, spoon halfway to his mouth, confused. Then annoyed. Like this was an interruption he hadn't scheduled. Klein kept her voice steady, professional. "Evan Mercer, stand up. You're under arrest for aggravated murder and use of a firearm in the commission of a felony." Evan's face twisted. Not fear, indignation. "This is ridiculous. I already told you what happened. It was self-defense." Klein didn't argue, didn't engage. She just motioned for him to stand. Evan set the bowl down hard. Milk sloshed over the side. He stood slowly, making a show of it, like cooperating was beneath him. Klein moved behind him. "Hands behind your back." Evan complied, but his whole body radiated resentment. The cuffs clicked into place. Cold metal. Real consequence. Klein read him his rights. Again. Every word clear. Every word recorded. Linda stood in the corner, hands over her mouth, and tears streaming. "Evan, baby, don't say anything. Don't say anything until you talk to your lawyer." Evan didn't look at her. He was staring at Klein, jaw tight, eyes hard. "You can't prove anything. You don't have anything." Klein's expression didn't change. She just guided him toward the door. As they stepped outside, neighbors appeared on porches, phones out, cameras rolling. Evan's face flushed red. He hated this, hated being seen like this, hated the loss of control. One of the officers opened the patrol car door. Klein put her hand on Evan's head, guiding him in, the way cops do. Evan jerked away slightly. A small rebellion. Pointless? He ended up in the back seat anyway. The drive to the station was silent. Evan stared out the window, hands cuffed behind him, uncomfortable and angry. He kept replaying the moment in his head. I kept trying to figure out what they had, what they thought they had. He'd been so careful, deleted the messages, told the story, stayed calm. How could they upgrade the charges? What did they find? The questions spun in his mind, but he didn't have answers, and that lack of control gnawed at him. By the time they arrived at the station, his confidence had cracked just slightly, not enough to show on his face, but enough to feel in his chest. A tightness, a whisper of fear he didn't want to acknowledge. Booking was mechanical. Fingerprints again, photos again, property bagged. The process stripped away the last bits of teenage normalcy. No phone, no shoes with laces, no belt. Just a detention uniform and a pair of slip-on shoes that didn't fit right. Evan tried to joke with one of the officers, a nervous laugh. "This is crazy, right? Like, this is all a misunderstanding." The officer didn't respond, just logged the items and moved him along. The system didn't care about his charm, didn't care about his age. It just processed him, one step at a time, each step pulling him further from the life he thought he'd keep. The interrogation room was small. Cinder block walls, a table bolted to the floor, 2 chairs, a camera in the corner, red light blinking. Evan sat down, hands now cuffed in front of him. His lawyer, Clara Finch, arrived 20 minutes later. She looked tired, overworked, carrying a briefcase that had seen better days. She sat beside Evan and leaned in close. "Don't say anything unless I tell you to. Understand?" Evan nodded, but his fingers tapped the table. A nervous rhythm. He wanted to talk, wanted to explain, wanted to control the narrative. Silence felt like losing. Klein entered with a folder and a bottle of water. She set the water in front of Evan, sat down across from him, opened the folder slowly, let the silence stretch. Then she started, calm, methodical. "Evan, we've been going over everything, the scene, the statements, the evidence, and I want to give you a chance to clarify some things." Clara leaned forward. "What evidence, specifically?" Klein glanced at her, then back at Evan. "Let's start with the timeline. Evan, you said Caleb lunged at you, that you were scared, that it happened fast." Evan nodded. "Yeah, that's what happened." Klein nodded slowly. "Okay, but the medical examiner's report shows Caleb was shot from several feet away, and he was backing up, not lunging." Evan's face tightened. "That's not... it felt like he was close. Everything was happening so fast. Maybe I remembered it wrong." Klein made a note. "Maybe. Or maybe it didn't happen the way you said." Clara put a hand on Evan's arm. "Lieutenant, my client was in a traumatic situation. Memory under stress isn't reliable. You know that." Klein nodded. "I do, but physical evidence is reliable, and the evidence doesn't support Evan's version." She flipped a page. "Let's talk about after the shooting. You said you went outside because you needed air. How long were you out there?" Evan shifted. "I don't know, a minute, maybe 2. Klein looked up. "Did you look around? Check the street?" Evan hesitated, just a fraction of a second, but Klein saw it. "No, I just stood there." Klein tilted her head slightly. "You sure? Because we have witnesses who saw someone on your porch, scanning the neighborhood. Looking around? That sound like something you'd do if you were in shock?" Evan's jaw clenched. "I don't remember. Maybe I did. I don't know. I wasn't thinking straight." Klein let that sit. Then she delivered the line she'd been waiting to use. "Evan, there are cameras on your street." Evan's posture stiffened. His eyes flicked to Clara, then back to Klein. "So?" Klein kept her tone even. "So we have footage. Of that night. Of someone stepping onto your porch, right after the shot." Evan's breathing quickened, just slightly. "That doesn't prove anything." Klein leaned forward. "It proves you went outside. It proves you looked around. It proves you were aware enough to check if anyone was watching." Evan's voice rose. "I told you I needed air. That's not illegal. Klein nodded. You're right, it's not. But it is inconsistent with someone in shock. Someone who just accidentally shot somebody doesn't step outside and calmly scan the street. They panic. They call for help. They try to save the person. You did none of those things. Evan's hands curled into fists. You're twisting everything, Clara interrupted. Lieutenant, unless you're charging my client with something specific related to this footage, I think we're done here. Klein closed the folder. Stood. We're charging him with murder. Premeditated. Intentional. And the footage supports that. Evan's face went pale. That's insane. You can't prove that. Klein looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, Evan looked away first. We'll let a jury decide. She walked to the door, paused, turned back. One more thing, Evan. We recovered your search history. You're from the night of the arrest. You were looking up how long gunshot residue stays on clothes, looking up juvenile sentencing, looking up if we could recover deleted texts. Evan's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Klein continued. Innocent people don't do that. Scared people don't do that. Guilty people do. Clara stood quickly. We're invoking. No more questions. Klein nodded. That's fine. We have enough. She left the room. The door clicked shut behind her. Evan sat frozen, staring at the table, chest rising and falling fast. Clara leaned in. Did you search those things? Evan's voice was barely a whisper. I was trying to understand what was happening. Clara closed her eyes, took a deep breath. Evan, you need to stop talking. To everyone, including me, unless I ask directly. Do you understand? Evan nodded. But inside, he was spiraling. The walls were closing. The lies were collapsing. And for the first time since that night, Evan Mercer felt genuinely afraid. He asked for a lawyer, because the truth was already in the next room. The news spread fast. Small towns always work that way. By afternoon, everyone in Briar Glen knew Evan Mercer had been arrested again. Upgraded charges, murder, not manslaughter, not accident, murder. The neighborhood split into factions. Some whispered that he was just a kid, that something must have pushed him, that Caleb must have done something. Others said age didn't matter, said murder was murder, said if you're old enough to pull a trigger, you're old enough to face the consequences. The debate played out on porches, in grocery store aisles, at school pickup lines. Everyone had an opinion. Nobody had all the facts, but that didn't stop them from choosing sides. Dana couldn't leave her house. Every time she tried, she felt eyes on her, judging, wondering, blaming. She'd become the mother of a killer, the woman who let it happen, the person who should have seen it coming. She stopped answering her phone, stopped checking messages. Her sister came by with groceries and found Dana sitting in the dark, curtains drawn, staring at nothing. Dana, you have to eat. You have to take care of yourself. Dana didn't respond, didn't move. Her sister set the bags on the counter and sat beside her. This isn't your fault. Dana's voice came out flat, hollow. Then whose fault is it? Her sister had no answer, because the truth was complicated, and complicated didn't fit on a porch conversation or a Facebook comment. Online, the case went viral. True crime pages picked it up. Reddit threads dissected every detail. YouTubers made videos with clickbait titles and dramatic music. Evan's school photo circulated, the one where he looked young, innocent. People argued in the comments. He's 16, his brain isn't fully developed. Versus, he knew exactly what he was doing. The story fed the machine. Outrage, debate, the endless need for content. Caleb became a footnote in some versions. A name, a victim, but not a person. Evan became the star, the monster or the misunderstood teen, depending on who was telling the story. Dana saw some of it before she stopped looking. Each post felt like a knife. Evan's defense attorney, Clara Finch, knew the case would be hard. She'd handled juvenile cases before, but this one had teeth. The evidence was strong. The optics were bad. A teenage boy killing his mother's boyfriend in a domestic dispute wasn't sympathetic, especially when that boy showed no remorse. She started building a strategy anyway, because that was the job. She'd argue impulsivity, adolescent brain development, the stress of a blended family. She'd challenge the video quality, question the GSR interpretation, suggest that Caleb had been aggressive in ways the family didn't report. It wasn't about truth. It was about doubt, reasonable doubt. And if she could create even a sliver of it, she'd done her job. The prosecution had a different strategy. A DA Lynn Park wasn't interested in painting Evan as a monster. Monsters were easy to dismiss. Aberrations. She wanted the jury to see him as something more dangerous, a calculated person who believed rules didn't apply to him. Someone who killed not in a blind rage, but in a moment of cold decision. She would use his own words against him, his searches, his social media, his behavior after the shooting. She'd show the jury a teenager who checked the street for witnesses, then lied about it, who pressured his mother to cover for him, who showed more concern for his phone than for the man bleeding out on the floor. The bind-over hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. That hearing would determine if Evan stayed in juvenile court or moved to adult court. It was the first major battle. Juvenile court meant a maximum sentence until age 21, a chance at release while still young. Adult court meant decades, possibly life. The stakes couldn't be higher. Clara prepared her arguments. Evan was 16, no prior record, a product of divorce and instability, capable of rehabilitation. The system was designed to give kids a second chance. Park prepared her counter, the severity of the crime, the awareness demonstrated by his actions, the need to protect society. Some acts were so serious that age became secondary to accountability. Dana was subpoenaed to testify at the bind-over hearing. When the notice arrived, she sat on her kitchen floor and cried for an hour. They were asking her to stand in a courtroom and talk about her son, to say things that could send him to adult prison, to choose between protecting him and telling the truth. She called Caleb's mother. She didn't know why. Maybe because Renee was the only other person who understood loss this deep. Renee answered on the 4th ring. Her voice was guarded. "What do you want, Dana?" Dana's voice shook. "They want me to testify. Well, against Evan, and I don't know what to do." Renee was quiet for a long moment. "Tell the truth. That's all Caleb would want. That's all any of us deserve." The week before the hearing, Evan called Dana from jail. Collect call. She almost didn't accept it, but she did. His voice came through, tinny and distant. "Mom, I need you." Dana closed her eyes. "Evan, I can't do this right now." Evan's tone shifted, harder. "You have to. You're my mom. You have to say it was self-defense. You have to tell them Caleb was aggressive." Dana felt something inside her snap. "He wasn't, Evan. Caleb wasn't aggressive. He was backing away. I saw it. I was there." Evan's voice rose. "You're going to let them destroy me? You're going to side with him over me?" Dana's tears came fast. "I'm not siding with anyone. I'm just telling the truth." Evan's voice turned cold. "Then you're not my mom anymore." The line went dead. Dana sat holding the phone for 20 minutes, numb, empty, wondering how the boy she raised had become someone she didn't recognize. The day of the bind-over hearing arrived. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, curious locals, Caleb's family on one side, Dana alone on the other. Evan was brought in wearing a detention uniform. He looked smaller in it. Younger, Clara was counting on that. She needed the judge to see a child, not a killer. Evan sat at the defense table, hands folded, face blank. He glanced at Dana once. She looked away. Judge Margaret Wexler entered, and everyone stood. She was known for being tough but fair. She'd handled bind-over cases before. She knew the weight of the decision. This wasn't just about Evan. It was about what kind of message the system sent. She took her seat and looked at both sides. "Let's begin." The courtroom felt heavier than most. Higher ceilings, dark wood, the kind of space designed to make people feel small in the presence of the law. Rows of benches filled quickly. Caleb's mother sat in the front row with her sister and 2 cousins. Their faces were set, hard. They weren't here for debate. They were here for justice. Dana sat on the opposite side, 3 rows back, alone. She couldn't sit closer, couldn't bear the weight of being visible. She wore a plain gray sweater and kept her eyes down. Behind her, reporters scribbled notes. Phones were silenced, but cameras were ready for the moment they could legally film. This wasn't just a hearing. It was theater, and everyone knew it. Evan entered through a side door, escorted by 2 bailiffs. He wore the detention uniform still. Navy blue, too big in the shoulders. It made him look young, which was the point. Clara had argued against shackling him, argued it would prejudice the judge. The request was granted. Evan walked to the defense table without restraints, head up, posture straight. He was performing composure, trying to show he wasn't a threat. But his eyes betrayed him. They scanned the room, landed on his mother, held for a moment. Dana didn't look up. Evan's jaw tightened. He sat down next to Clara and folded his hands on the table. The picture of a respectful teenager. If you didn't know what he'd done, you might believe it. Judge Wexler entered, and the room rose as one. She was in her late 50s, gray hair pulled back, reading glasses hanging on a chain around her neck. She'd presided over Briar Glens Court for 12 years. She didn't tolerate games, didn't tolerate disrespect, and she had no patience for people who thought their age or their smile could buy them leniency. She sat, adjusted her microphone, and looked out over the courtroom. "Be seated." Everyone obeyed. She opened the file in front of her, took her time, let the silence build. Then she looked at Evan. Really looked. "Mr. Mercer, do you understand why you're here today?" Evan glanced at Clara. She nodded. He cleared his throat. "Yes, Your Honor," Judge Wexler continued. "This court will determine whether your case remains in juvenile jurisdiction or whether it will be transferred to adult criminal court. This is not a trial. This is a hearing to assess the severity of the alleged offense, your amenability to rehabilitation, and the public interest. Do you understand?" Evan nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge's eyes stayed on him. "I need to hear you say it." Evan's voice came out slightly defensive. "I understand." Judge Wexler made a note. She'd already learned something. Evan didn't like being corrected, even now, even here. She turned to the attorneys. "Counsel will begin with opening statements. Ms. Park, you may proceed." A D.A. Park stood. She didn't walk to the center of the room, didn't pace dramatically, just stood at her table, hands resting lightly on the surface. Her voice was calm, steady. "Your Honor, this case involves a 16-year-old who made a choice. Not a mistake, not an accident. A choice. Evan Mercer armed himself during a verbal argument, shot and killed Caleb Rourke, and then immediately began constructing a false narrative. The evidence will show this was not a crime of passion or impulse. It was an act of deliberate violence followed by calculated deception. The defendant checked the street for witnesses, pressured his mother to lie, deleted evidence from his phone, and showed no remorse. The severity of this crime, combined with the defendant's conduct, demonstrates he is not amenable to the rehabilitative goals of juvenile court. The state asks this court to transfer jurisdiction. Clara Finch rose next. She walked to the center of the room, softer in her approach. Her voice carried empathy. "Your Honor, Evan Mercer is a child, not legally, not technically, but developmentally, neurologically, he is still a child. His brain is not fully formed. His ability to assess consequences, to regulate emotion, to make sound decisions under stress, all of those are still developing. The tragedy that occurred in his home was the culmination of months of stress in a blended family. Caleb Rourke, by all accounts, was trying to impose authority in a home where Evan felt displaced. The state wants to paint my client as calculating, but what they call calculation, I call fear. A teenager in crisis who made a terrible, irreversible mistake. Evan deserves a chance at rehabilitation. That's what the juvenile system is for. The judge listened without expression. When Clara sat, Judge Wexler made another note. Then she nodded to Park. "Call your first witness." Park stood. "The state calls Lieutenant Marisol Klein." Klein entered from the back, walked to the witness stand, was sworn in. She stated her name and rank, then settled into the chair. Park approached. "Lieutenant, can you describe the scene you encountered on the night of the incident?" Klein spoke clearly, without embellishment. She described the house, the body, Dana's condition, Evan's behavior. He was seated on the curb, calm. When I asked what happened, he said it was self-defense, that Caleb had lunged at him. But his demeanor was inconsistent with someone in shock. He asked about retrieving his phone, not about the victim's condition. Park nodded. "What did you observe about the scene itself?" Klein described the evidence, the casing, the position of the body, the blood pattern. Everything suggested the victim had been backing away, not advancing. Clara stood. Objection. Speculation. Judge Wexler looked at Klein. "Is this based on physical evidence or your interpretation? A lieutenant?" Klein didn't hesitate. "Physical evidence, Your Honor, confirmed by the medical examiner and scene reconstruction team." Judge Wexler nodded. "Overruled. Continue." Park walked Klein through the rest, the searches on Evan's phone, the deleted messages, the footage from the neighbor's camera. At the mention of video, Evan shifted slightly in his seat. Park caught it. So did the judge. Clara's cross-examination focused on Evan's age. "Lieutenant, have you handled cases involving teenagers before?" Klein nodded. "Many," Clara continued. "And isn't it true that teenagers often react to trauma in unexpected ways? That what looks like calm might actually be shock?" Klein paused. "It's possible, but in this case, the defendant's actions after the shooting suggest awareness. He deleted messages. He searched for legal information. That's not shock, that's strategy." Clara frowned. "But you're not a psychologist, are you?" Klein's voice stayed even. "No, but I've interviewed enough people to recognize the difference between panic and planning." Clara sat down, unsatisfied, but out of moves. The second witness was the medical examiner, Dr. Mendez. She was clinical, professional. She described Caleb's injuries in terms that were precise but not gruesome. She explained the trajectory, the distance, the lack of close contact indicators. Based on the physical evidence, the shot was fired from approximately 4 to 5 feet away. The victim's wounds and positioning suggest he was attempting to retreat, not advance. Park asked, "In your professional opinion, is this consistent with self-defense?" Dr. Mendez paused. "That's not for me to determine. But the physical evidence does not support a close-quarters struggle." Clara had no questions. The science spoke for itself. Then came Dana. The courtroom tensed. She walked slowly to the stand, hands shaking. She was sworn in, voice barely audible. Park approached gently. "Ms. Mercer, I know this is difficult. Can you describe what happened the night Caleb Rourke was killed?" Dana's eyes filled immediately. "We were eating dinner. Evan and Caleb argued. It escalated. Evan went to the hallway. Caleb followed, but he wasn't attacking. He was trying to calm things down." Her voice broke. "I heard Caleb say, 'Evan, don't.' And then, the shot." Park waited. What did Evan do after? Dana wiped her eyes. He walked past me, went outside. He wasn't crying. He wasn't panicking. He just... I left. Park's final question was the hardest. Did Evan ask you to lie about what happened? Dana looked at her son. Evan stared back, face hard. Dana's voice came out as a whisper. Yes, he told me to say it was self-defense, that Caleb lunged, but that's not what happened. The courtroom went silent. Evan's hands clenched into fists under the table. Clara stood quickly. Your Honor, this is a mother under unimaginable stress. Her testimony is unreliable. Judge Wexler's voice was sharp. Counsel, sit down. I'll determine reliability. Clara sat. Dana left the stand, shoulders shaking. She didn't look at Evan again. As she walked past his table, he muttered something under his breath. Too low for the judge to hear, but Dana heard. Her steps faltered. Then she kept walking. The courtroom stayed quiet. Like the building itself was about to speak. The moment arrived on the third day of testimony. The courtroom was fuller than before. Word had spread that the prosecution was introducing video evidence. People wanted to see it, wanted to witness the moment the defense's story cracked open. Evan sat at the defense table, leg bouncing under the table, trying to look indifferent. But his eyes kept darting to the screen that had been set up on a rolling cart. He knew what was coming. He'd known since Klein mentioned cameras, but knowing and seeing were different things. And the seeing was about to destroy him. Ada Park stood and called her next witness. The state calls Noah Vickers. Noah walked to the stand, hands in his pockets until he was reminded to raise his right hand. He was sworn in, then sat. He looked uncomfortable. He wasn't used to this, wasn't used to being the center of anything. Park approached with a calm smile. Mr. Vickers, can you tell the court where you live? Noah cleared his throat. Across the street from the Mercer residence, 18 Maple Crest. Park nodded. And do you have any security devices at your home? Noah nodded. Yeah, a doorbell camera. My daughter made me get it, said it was safer. Park walked to the evidence table and picked up a small tablet. Is this the device? Noah squinted. Looks like it, yeah. Park handed it to the bailiff, who marked it as evidence. Park continued. Can you describe what this camera records? Noah shifted in his seat. It's motion activated. Anytime someone walks up to the porch, it starts recording, saves it to the cloud automatically. Park nodded. And on the night of the incident, did your camera record anything? Noah looked down. Yeah, I didn't know at first, but when the police came by and asked, I checked. There was a clip from that night. Park turned to the judge. Your Honor, the state would like to introduce Exhibit 23. Video footage from Mr. Vickers's doorbell camera time-stamped the night of the homicide. Judge Wexler looked to Clara. Any objection? Clara stood. Yes, Your Honor, we object on the grounds of relevance and potential prejudice. The video is grainy, taken from a distance, and does not clearly identify my client. Judge Wexler motioned for both attorneys to approach the bench. They spoke in low voices for a minute. Then Park returned to her table and pulled out a folder. Your Honor, we anticipated this objection. We have testimony from a digital forensics analyst confirming the file's authenticity, metadata integrity, and enhancement process. We also have corroborating testimony regarding identifiable features. Judge Wexler nodded. I'll allow it, but Ms. Park, keep it relevant. Park smiled slightly. Thank you, Your Honor. Clara sat down, jaw tight. Evan's leg stopped bouncing. He was frozen now, watching, waiting. Park called the forensics analyst next, a man named Derek Hall, mid-30s, wearing a button-down shirt and glasses. He explained the process in terms a jury could understand. The video file was downloaded directly from the cloud server. We verified the timestamp, checked for any signs of editing or tampering. There were none. The file is original and unaltered. Park nodded. And did you enhance the footage in any way? Hall nodded. We used standard enhancement software to improve clarity, brightness adjustments, contrast, noise reduction, all standard procedures. The original file is preserved and available for review. Park thanked him and turned to the judge. Your Honor, at this time, the state would like to play the video for the court. Judge Wexler nodded. Proceed. The lights dimmed slightly. The screen flickered to life. The courtroom went silent. Everyone leaned forward. Even the reporters stopped writing. The video began. Black and white. Night vision. A quiet street. The timestamp in the corner read 9:43 p.m. For a few seconds, nothing. Just the empty porch across the street. Then, faintly, audio. Muffled. Voices raised. Then a sharp crack. Unmistakable. A gunshot. The sound echoed in the silent courtroom. A few people gasped. Caleb's mother closed her eyes, hand over her mouth. Dana stared at the screen, tears streaming. A few seconds later, motion. The camera's sensor triggered. A figure stepped out onto the Mercer's porch. Barefoot. The figure paused, stood still for a moment. Then the head turned. Left, then right. Slowly, deliberately, scanning the street. The movement was calm, controlled, not frantic, not panicked, just checking. The figure stood there for 10 seconds, then turned and walked back inside. The video ended. The screen went black. The courtroom stayed silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The weight of those 18 seconds pressed down on everyone. Park let the silence hold. Then she spoke. Let's watch that again. The video played a second time. This time, Park narrated. Here, at timestamp 9:43 and 16 seconds, we hear the gunshot. 3 seconds later, motion is detected. The figure emerges. Watch the posture. Upright, steady, not stumbling, not collapsing. Now, watch the head movement. Left, right, scanning the environment, assessing. This is not someone in shock. This is someone checking if anyone saw. She paused the video on a frame where the figure's hand was raised near the mouth. Notice this gesture. The defendant is known to bite his knuckle when anxious. We have corroborating video from school showing the same behavior. Park pressed play again. Let it finish. Then she turned off the screen. The lights came back up. The courtroom felt different now, heavier, like the air had thickened. Clara stood for cross-examination. Mr. Hall, you said the video was enhanced. Doesn't that mean it was altered? Hall shook his head. Enhanced, not altered. We improved visibility. We didn't change content. Clara pressed. But in low light, at that distance, can you definitively say that figure is my client? Hall paused. Based on height, build, bare feet consistent with the defendant's appearance at booking, and behavioral identifiers, yes, it's consistent. Clara frowned. Consistent isn't certain. Hall didn't blink. In forensic analysis, consistency across multiple data points is as close to certainty as we get. Clara sat down. She had nothing else. The video had done its work. Park wasn't finished. She introduced the GSR results, the scene reconstruction, the phone searches, each piece stacked on top of the last, the medical examiner's findings, Dana's testimony, the text messages, the timeline. It wasn't just one piece of evidence. It was a symphony, every instrument playing the same truth. Evan sat rigid at the defense table, face pale, jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. Clara leaned over and whispered something. He shook his head. She whispered again, more urgently. Evan's hands were trembling now, not from cold, from the realization that his carefully constructed story was falling apart in real time, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Judge Wexler looked at Park. "Anything further?" Park shook her head. "No, Your Honor. The state rests." Judge Wexler turned to Clara. "Does the defense wish to present evidence?" Clara stood slowly. She knew she had nothing that could counter what the jury had just seen. "The defense reserves the right to present evidence at trial, Your Honor. For purposes of this hearing, we rely on our opening statement and the argument that the juvenile system is designed for exactly this kind of situation." Judge Wexler nodded. "Very well. We'll take a short recess. Then I'll hear closing arguments." She stood. Everyone rose. Evan was led out by the bailiffs. As he passed the gallery, he glanced at the screen. Still dark now. But the image was burned into everyone's mind. The footage had played, and the smirk never came back. The recess felt longer than 15 minutes. People filed out into the hallway, voices low, faces tight. Caleb's family huddled together near the vending machines. Nobody bought anything. They just stood there, holding each other, trying to process what they'd seen. One of Caleb's cousins whispered, "He didn't even care. He just looked around like he was checking the weather." Renee, Caleb's mother, said nothing. She just stared at the floor, arms wrapped around herself. Dana stayed in the courtroom, didn't move from her seat. A victim advocate approached and asked if she needed anything. Dana shook her head. She didn't need anything. She'd already lost everything that mattered. When court resumed, the tension was different, sharper. The video had shifted the room's energy. It wasn't a question of what happened anymore. It was a question of what to do about it. Judge Wexler took her seat and looked at both attorneys. "Closing arguments. Ms. Finch, you may proceed." Clara stood. She walked to the center of the room, hands clasped in front of her. She looked tired, worn down, but she had a job to do. "Your Honor, no one is disputing that a tragedy occurred. Caleb Rourke is gone. A family is grieving. And Evan Mercer's life is forever changed. But sending a 16-year-old to adult prison doesn't bring Caleb back. It doesn't heal anyone. It just destroys another life." She continued, voice steady. "The prosecution wants you to see Evan as cold, calculated. But what you're really seeing is a teenager in crisis, a boy who grew up in a broken home, who watched his parents divorce, who struggled to accept a new authority figure. The science is clear. Adolescent brains are not fully developed. The prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for decision-making and impulse control, doesn't mature until the mid-20s. Evan didn't have the neurological tools to handle that situation the way an adult would. He made a terrible choice. But it was the choice of a child, not a criminal mastermind." She paused. "Let that sink in. The juvenile system exists for exactly this reason, to rehabilitate, to give young people a chance to grow, to change, to become better. Evan deserves that chance. Thank you, Your Honor." Ada Park stood. She didn't rush, didn't walk to the center, just stood at her table, hands resting on the wood. "Your Honor, let's be clear about what we're discussing. This isn't about a mistake. This isn't about a momentary lapse in judgment. This is about a series of deliberate choices. Evan Mercer didn't just pull a trigger. He accessed a weapon he knew was locked away. He aimed it at a man who was backing away. He fired. And then, in the moments after, he didn't call for help. Didn't check on the victim. Didn't comfort his mother. He stepped outside and checked the street. He scanned for witnesses. He calculated. Park let that word hang. "That's not impulse. That's awareness," she continued, voice calm but firm. "The defense wants to talk about brain development. And yes, 16-year-olds don't have fully developed prefrontal cortexes. But Evan knew right from wrong. We know that because he tried to hide what he did. He coached his mother. He deleted messages. He searched online for how long evidence lasts. Those aren't the actions of someone who doesn't understand consequences. Those are the actions of someone trying to avoid them." Park picked up a folder, held it up. "This case isn't just about the shooting. It's about what came after, the lies, the manipulation, the complete lack of remorse. At no point has Evan Mercer expressed sorrow for Caleb's death, only anger that he got caught. Park set the folder down. Your Honor, the juvenile system is built on the premise that young offenders can be rehabilitated. But rehabilitation requires remorse. It requires accountability. It requires a willingness to change. Evan has shown none of those things. What he's shown is entitlement, a belief that the rules don't apply to him. And if this court sends the message that a 16-year-old can commit murder, cover it up, and face minimal consequences because of his age, we're not serving justice. We're enabling the next tragedy. She paused, looked at the judge. The state asks this court to transfer jurisdiction, not as punishment, but as accountability. Thank you, Your Honor. Judge Wexler took notes throughout both arguments. When Park sat, the judge looked up. I'll take this under advisement. We'll reconvene tomorrow at 10 a.m. for my ruling. She stood. Everyone rose. Evan was led out. He looked smaller now, less defiant, more afraid. Clara followed him to the holding area. She sat across from him in a small cinder-block room. How bad is it? Evan asked, voice quiet. Clara didn't sugarcoat it. It's bad. The video hurt us. Your mother's testimony hurt us. The evidence is strong. Evan's jaw tightened. So what? I just give up? Clara shook her head. No, but you need to prepare yourself. If the judge transfers jurisdiction, we go to trial in adult court, and that's a different game. Evan leaned back, head against the wall. This is insane. I was defending myself. Clara looked at him, really looked. Evan, were you? Evan's eyes snapped to hers. What? Clara's voice was gentle, but firm. Were you defending yourself, or were you angry? Because if you were angry, or if you felt disrespected, if you wanted him gone, that's not self-defense. That's something else. And if we go to trial, the jury is going to ask the same question. Evan didn't answer, just stared at the table. After a long silence, Clara stood. Think about it. We'll talk tomorrow after the judge rules. She left. Evan sat alone in the room. The walls felt like they were closing in. That night, Dana couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the video in her mind. The figure on the porch, her son, checking the street. She'd known deep down that Evan was lying, but seeing it, seeing the proof, made it real in a way she couldn't escape. She got up and walked to Evan's room. She hadn't been inside since the arrest. The door creaked open. The room looked frozen in time. Unmade bed, clothes on the floor, posters on the wall, a childhood trapped in amber. She sat on the bed and picked up a stuffed animal from when he was little, a dinosaur, his favorite. She held it and cried, not for the boy he was, for the boy he could have been. Across town, Caleb's mother sat in her kitchen with a cup of tea she hadn't touched. Her sister sat beside her. Are you okay? Renee shook her head. No, I'll never be okay, but I need that judge to do the right thing. I need Caleb's life to matter. Her sister squeezed her hand. It does. It will. Renee looked out the window. That video, seeing him just standing there, looking around, like Caleb was nothing, like his life was just an inconvenience. Her voice broke. How do you do that? How do you take a life and then just check the street? Her sister had no answer, because there wasn't one. And some things didn't make sense. They just were. And you had to live with them? The next morning, the courtroom filled again. Evan was brought in. He looked like he hadn't slept, eyes red, face pale. He sat beside Clara, hands folded on the table. Judge Wexler entered. Everyone stood. She sat and opened a folder. I've reviewed the evidence, the testimony, and the arguments from both sides. This is not an easy decision, but it is a necessary one. She looked at Evan. Mr. Mercer, stand. Evan stood slowly. Clara stood beside him. Judge Wexler continued, voice firm. This court finds that the severity of the offense, combined with the evidence of post-offense conduct, demonstrates that you are not amenable to the rehabilitative goals of the juvenile system. Furthermore, the public interest requires accountability proportional to the harm caused. This case is hereby transferred to adult criminal court. Dana made a sound, a small broken gasp. Renee closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. Evan's legs wobbled. Clara put a hand on his arm to steady him. Judge Wexler wasn't finished. Mr. Mercer, you are 16 years old, but the choices you made were not the choices of a confused child. They were deliberate, calculated, and they ended a man's life. This court cannot, in good conscience, treat that lightly. You will face trial as an adult. She hit the gavel once. Final. Absolute. Evan was led out. He didn't look at his mother, didn't look at anyone, just walked, head down, into a future he couldn't control. The law had just said what the family couldn't. This was no longer childhood. And the trial began 4 months later. 4 months of motions, discovery, plea negotiations that went nowhere. Clara had tried, offered manslaughter, offered a guilty plea in exchange for a capped sentence. Park refused every time. He gets a jury, she said, and the jury gets to see everything. So that's what happened. 12 jurors, 7 women, 5 men, ages ranging from 23 to 68. They came from different backgrounds, different beliefs. But they all agreed to one thing during selection. They could be fair. They could look at a 16-year-old and still hold him accountable if the evidence demanded it. That's all Park needed. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Witnesses repeated what they'd said at the Bindover hearing, the medical examiner, the crime scene techs, neighbors. Dana testified again, this time in front of a jury. She looked even more fragile than before, thinner, older. When she spoke about Evan asking her to lie, several jurors leaned forward. One woman in the front row wiped her eyes. The video played again, in a bigger courtroom, on a bigger screen. The jury watched in silence, watched Evan step out, watched him scan the street, watched him go back inside. When it ended, the room stayed quiet for a full 10 seconds. Park didn't say a word. Didn't need to. The video spoke for itself. Clara did her best. She called a psychologist who testified about adolescent brain development, about trauma responses, about how stress could mimic calculation. The psychologist was credible, well-spoken, but on cross-examination, Park asked one question that changed everything. Doctor, does immaturity explain why the defendant deleted messages after the shooting? The psychologist hesitated. It could be part of a stress response. Park tilted her head. Or it could be an attempt to hide evidence, correct? The psychologist nodded reluctantly. That's also possible. Park sat down. The seed of doubt was planted, or rather, the seed of certainty. Evan didn't testify. Clara advised against it. The prosecution will tear you apart, she said. They'll ask about the video, about the searches, about your lack of remorse. You can't win on the stand. Evan wanted to tell his side, wanted to explain, but Clara was firm. Silence is your best option. So Evan sat at the defense table for 2 weeks, watching people talk about him, define him, judge him. And he couldn't say a word. It ate at him, made him feel small, powerless. For someone who needed control, it was torture. But Clara knew what she was doing, because every time Evan's face appeared on the courtroom screens, in photos, in the video, the jury saw enough. Closing arguments were powerful on both sides. Clara painted Evan as a broken kid from a broken home who made an irreversible mistake in a moment of fear. She asked the jury to remember he was 16, to remember that children make terrible choices, to remember that the justice system was supposed to rehabilitate, not destroy. Her voice broke at the end. Don't add another tragedy to this case. Don't throw away a life that can still be saved. Some jurors nodded. Others looked unmoved. Park's closing was sharper. She walked the jury through the timeline, the escalation, the weapon, the shot, the porch, the lies. This isn't about age. It's about choice. Evan Mercer chose to arm himself, chose to fire, chose to cover it up. And he has never, not once, said he was sorry. Park's final line hit like a gavel. Caleb Rourke went to work that day, bought dinner, sent a text about working things out. He was trying, and for that he was killed. The defense wants you to focus on Evan's age. I'm asking you to focus on Evan's actions, because actions have consequences, and those consequences don't disappear just because the person who caused them is young. She sat down. The jury was dismissed for deliberation. The courtroom emptied slowly. Caleb's family stayed together in the hallway. Dana sat alone on a bench outside, hands folded in her lap, staring at nothing. Evan was taken back to holding. The waiting began. The jury deliberated for 8 hours. Long enough to feel endless. Short enough to signal they weren't deeply divided. When the bailiff announced they'd reached a verdict, everyone filed back in. The air felt electric, dangerous. Evan was brought out. His face was pale, eyes darting. He sat beside Clara, leg bouncing under the table. Clara put a hand on his arm. Whatever happens, stay calm. Don't react. Evan nodded, but didn't look convinced. The jury filed in. None of them looked at Evan. That was a bad sign. Defense attorneys knew. When a jury convicts, they don't make eye contact. They can't. The guilt of judging is too heavy. Judge Wexler addressed the foreperson. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreperson, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a tight mouth, stood. We have, Your Honor. The bailiff took the verdict form and handed it to the judge. Our Judge Wexler read it silently. Her face didn't change. She handed it back. The defendant will rise. Evan stood. His leg shook. Clara stood beside him, hand still on his arm. Judge Wexler nodded to the foreperson. Please read the verdict. The foreperson's voice was steady, clear. In the matter of the State versus Evan Mercer, on the count of aggravated murder, we find the defendant guilty. The word landed like a stone. Guilty. Dana gasped, hand over her mouth, tears spilling. Renee closed her eyes and let out a breath she'd been holding for months. Evan swayed slightly. Clara tightened her grip on his arm. The foreperson continued. On the count of discharge of a firearm in the commission of a felony, we find the defendant guilty. Judge Wexler thanked the jury, dismissed them, turned to Evan. Mr. Mercer, you may be seated. Evan sat heavily, like his legs had given out. His hands were shaking. His face had gone from pale to gray. For the first time since the night of the shooting, he looked genuinely terrified. Judge Wexler set a sentencing date, 6 weeks out. She ordered a pre-sentence investigation, mental health evaluation, victim impact statements to be submitted. She spoke in procedural tones, but her eyes stayed on Evan. You've been found guilty by a jury of your peers. Sentencing will reflect the severity of your actions and the impact on the victim's family. Until then, you will remain in custody. She hit the gavel. Court was adjourned. Evan was let out. He glanced back at Dana one last time. She was crying so hard she couldn't see. He turned away, walked through the door, and disappeared into the system that would now define the rest of his life. Guilty didn't sound like enough, but it was a start. 6 weeks felt like 6 years. For some, it dragged. For others, it vanished. Dana spent the time in a fog. She went to work, came home, stared at walls. She didn't eat much, didn't sleep well. People asked how she was doing. She lied and said fine. She wasn't fine. She'd never be fine. Her son was convicted of murder. The man she loved was gone, and she was caught between two kinds of grief that had no name. She wrote a letter to the judge, tore it up, wrote another, tore that up too. What could she say? That Evan deserved mercy? That Caleb deserved justice? Both were true. Both were impossible. In the end, she wrote nothing, just showed up. Caleb's family prepared differently. They wrote their statements carefully. Renee worked on hers for days, crossed out lines, rewrote them. She wanted to get it right, wanted to honor her son without drowning in rage. It was hard. The rage was always there, waiting. She attended a support group for families of homicide victims, sat in a circle of people who understood a grief most couldn't imagine. They told her whatever she felt was valid, that there was no wrong way to grieve. It helped. A little, enough to keep going. Her sister helped her practice reading the statement aloud. By the end, they were both crying. But Renee's voice stayed strong. She would speak, and Caleb would be heard. Sentencing day arrived cold and gray, the kind of morning that matched the weight everyone carried. The courtroom filled early, same faces, same seats. But the energy was different. This was the end, the final chapter. Evan was brought in wearing a suit. Clara had arranged it, wanted him to look human, sympathetic. The suit was too big, made him look like a kid playing dress-up. He sat beside Clara, hands folded on the table, eyes down. He'd been told not to make eye contact with the victim's family, not to react, just sit, listen, accept. It was the hardest thing he'd ever had to do, harder than the trial, because this was the moment he couldn't avoid, the moment the consequences became real. Judge Wexler entered. Everyone rose. She took her seat, adjusted her microphone, and looked out over the courtroom. We're here for sentencing in the matter of the state versus Evan Mercer. Before I impose sentence, the court will hear victim impact statements. Ms. Rourke, you may proceed. Renee stood slowly. I walked to the podium. She held her paper with both hands to keep them from shaking. She looked at the judge, then at Evan. Evan looked away. Renee's voice was steady when she spoke. My son Caleb was 38 years old when he died. He loved fishing, loved terrible action movies, loved his mother even when I was hard to love. He wasn't perfect, but he was mine, and he was trying. Renee's voice cracked slightly, but she pushed through. Caleb called me the day before he died, told me he was working things out with Dana and Evan, said he wanted to be a good example, a good man. He was trying so hard, and for that, he was killed. She looked directly at Evan now. Evan still wouldn't meet her eyes. You took my son. You took his future, his laughter, his kindness. You took everything. And you didn't even say you were sorry. Her voice rose. You checked the street. You lied. You tried to make your mother cover for you. You cared more about getting caught than about the man bleeding on the floor. That's not a child. That's not a mistake. That's cruelty. Renee took a breath, steadied herself. I don't know if you're capable of feeling remorse. I don't know if you understand what you've taken. But I want you to know that Caleb's life mattered. He was loved. He was valued. And every day he's gone is a day I have to live with a hole that will never close. She folded the paper, looked at the judge. I'm asking this court to give Evan Mercer a sentence that reflects the enormity of what he's done, not just to punish, but to protect. Because if he can do this at 16, I don't trust what he'll do at 26. Oh, thank you. She walked back to her seat. Her sister hugged her. Renee let the tears come now, let herself break. Because she'd done what she came to do. She'd spoken for Caleb. Another family member spoke. Then a co-worker of Caleb's. Each one painted a picture of a man who mattered, a man who was more than a headline, more than a victim. He was real, he was loved, and he was gone. By the end, several jurors in the gallery were crying. Dana was sobbing quietly in the back, and Evan sat frozen, face blank, jaw clenched. Judge Wexler thanked the speakers, then she turned to Evan. "Mr. Mercer, you have the right to address the court before I impose sentence. Do you wish to speak?" Clara leaned over and whispered urgently. Evan shook his head, then paused, changed his mind, stood. His voice was quiet, shaky. "I just want to say that I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I was scared that night. I didn't think. I just reacted. And I'm sorry that Caleb is gone. I'm sorry for the pain I caused." He sat down. The courtroom stayed silent. The apology felt hollow, late, self-focused. He'd said "I" 6 times, never said Caleb's name, never looked at Renee. It was the kind of apology that made things worse. Judge Wexler made a note. She'd heard enough. She opened her file, took a moment, then began. "Mr. Mercer, I've presided over many difficult cases, but this one stands out. Not because of the crime itself, though it is serious, but because of what you did after. You didn't call for help. You didn't try to save Caleb Rourke. You stepped outside and checked if anyone was watching. That tells me everything I need to know about your state of mind. Yeah, you weren't in shock. You weren't panicking. You were calculating." She paused. Let that sink in. "You were 16 years old enough to know fear, old enough to know death, old enough to know what a lie is. You knew all of those things, and you chose violence anyway," Judge Wexler continued. "The defense has argued for leniency based on your age, and I've considered that, but I've also considered the victim. Caleb Rourke deserved to live, deserved to grow old, deserved to be safe in the home he was trying to build. You took that from him. You took it deliberately, and you've shown no genuine remorse." She looked at Evan. "You didn't just fire a weapon. You performed afterward. You manipulated your mother. You deleted evidence. You researched how to avoid consequences. That's not immaturity. That's awareness." She picked up a document. "This court sentences you as follows. On the count of aggravated murder, you are sentenced to 25 years to life in state prison. On the count of firearm specification, an additional 3 years to be served consecutively. You will be eligible for parole review after serving a minimum of 28 years. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Renee closed her eyes, nodding. Dana made a choking sound, hands covering her face. Evan's head dropped, his shoulders shook. Not from remorse, from the realization that his life, as he knew it, was over. Judge Wexler wasn't finished. "Mr. Mercer, you will spend your youth and much of your adulthood behind bars. That is the consequence of your choices. I hope, in that time, you find the remorse you should have felt the moment you pulled that trigger. Court is adjourned." She hit the gavel. Once. Final. The sound echoed. Evan was led out. He looked back once, saw his mother crumbling in her seat, saw Caleb's family holding each other, saw the empty space his actions had created. Then he was gone, through the door, into a future measured in decades. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, cameras flashed. Renee stood on the steps with her family and made a brief statement. "Today, justice was served. It won't bring Caleb back, but it honors his life, and it says that no one, no matter their age, is above accountability. Thank you." She walked away. Didn't take questions, just walked. Because there was nothing left to say. Dana left through a side exit. Head down. Coat pulled tight. A reporter spotted her. "Ms. Mercer, do you have any comment?" Dana stopped, turned. Her face was raw, broken. "I lost 2 people I loved, and I have to live with that every day. That's my sentence." She walked to her car, drove home, sat in the driveway for an hour before she could make herself go inside. When she finally did, the house felt emptier than ever. She walked to the living room, stood where it happened, and whispered into the silence. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." She didn't know if she was talking to Caleb or Evan or herself. maybe all three. Years later, the case would be taught in criminal justice classes, used as an example of how modern evidence, doorbell cameras, phone data, digital footprints, changed investigations. The 18-second video became infamous, a grainy clip that captured a truth words couldn't. Evan's smirk, the one he wore that night, never came back. In prison, he was quiet, kept to himself, attended counseling because it was required. Whether he ever truly understood what he'd done, no one could say. Some people change. Some people just learn to pretend. Dana visited once. It was too hard. She never went back. Renee never stopped missing her son, but she built a life around the loss, started a foundation in Caleb's name, spoke at schools about domestic violence and conflict resolution, turned grief into purpose, because that's all she could do. The truth was there the whole time, in the evidence, in the timeline, in the moment Evan stepped onto that porch and looked both ways. The camera didn't blink. The story did. And in the end, justice found its way. Not because the system was perfect, but because sometimes, even in the darkest moments, the truth refuses to stay hidden. The gavel fell, and the smirk never came back. Prison was nothing like Evan imagined. He'd seen movies, heard stories, thought he knew what to expect, but no one prepares you for the sound. Metal doors slamming, voices echoing off concrete, the constant hum of fluorescent lights that never turn off, the smell of industrial cleaner mixed with sweat and something sour, the loss of privacy, the loss of choice. Every decision made for you. When to wake, when to eat, when to speak, when to be silent. For someone who needed control, it was suffocating. In the first month, Evan barely spoke, just moved through the routines like a ghost. Other inmates left him alone. Word spread fast. Teen killer, domestic case. People had opinions. Most kept them quiet. His cellmate was older, all mid-30s, serving time for robbery. Didn't ask questions, didn't offer advice, just coexisted. That was the unspoken rule. Mind your business. Do your time. Don't make waves. Evan followed it. He attended mandatory classes, anger management, life skills, GED prep, even though he'd already been in high school. The counselors tried to engage him, asked how he felt, what he was thinking. Evan gave short answers. Fine. Okay. I don't know. He built walls the same way he had at home, kept people out, kept emotions buried. It was safer that way, easier, because if he let himself feel, he'd have to face what he did, and he wasn't ready for that. Dana tried to move forward, tried to build some kind of life from the wreckage, but everything reminded her. The grocery store where she used to shop with Caleb, the diner where they met, the living room where it happened. She considered moving, selling the house, starting over somewhere new, but she couldn't afford it, couldn't find the energy. So she stayed, painted over the walls, replaced the carpet, rearranged the furniture, tried to make the space look different, but the memory stayed. It lived in the corners, in the way light came through the windows, in the silence that filled the house every night. She started seeing a therapist. It helped. A little, enough to get through the days. Her relationship with her sister became strained. Linda tried to be supportive, but there was an unspoken tension. Linda had watched Evan that week before the arrest, had seen the coldness, had felt the discomfort. She didn't blame Dana, but she also didn't understand how Dana didn't see it coming. Were there no signs? She asked one night over coffee. Dana stared into her cup. There were. I just didn't know what they meant. I thought it was normal teenage anger. I thought he'd grow out of it. Linda reached across the table. It's not your fault. Dana pulled her hand back. Then why does it feel like it is? The question hung between them, unanswered, because some guilt doesn't need logic. It just exists. Caleb's family found their own ways to cope. Renee threw herself into the foundation, organized events, raised money for conflict resolution programs in schools, gave talks about recognizing warning signs in adolescence. She became a voice, a presence. People listened, some because they cared, some because the story was sensational. Renee didn't care why. She just kept talking, kept saying Caleb's name. I kept making sure he wasn't forgotten. Her sister worried she was doing too much, burning out. "You need to rest," she'd say. Renee would shake her head. "If I rest, I think. If I think, I break. So I keep moving." It wasn't healthy, but it was survival. Briar Glen slowly returned to normal. The news crews left. The reporters stopped calling. The case faded from daily conversation, but it left a mark. Parents watched their teenagers more carefully, paid attention to mood swings, to anger, to isolation. Some enrolled their kids in therapy. Some installed more cameras. The sense of safety had been cracked, and cracks don't fully heal. They just get covered over. Noah Vickers, the neighbor with the doorbell camera, became a reluctant local figure. People asked him about it, thanked him. Some blamed him, irrationally, for being involved. He didn't like the attention, didn't want to be part of the story. He'd just been a guy trying to keep his porch safe. Now he was a witness in a murder case. He kept the camera, but he stopped checking the footage unless he had to. At the prison, Evan started attending a victim impact group. It was voluntary, but his counselor strongly suggested it. "It'll help with parole someday," she said. Evan didn't care about parole. That was decades away. But he went, sat in a circle with other inmates, listened to them talk about their crimes, about the people they hurt, about the guilt. Some cried. Some stayed stoic. Evan stayed quiet. Until one session, the facilitator asked him directly, "Evan, do you think about your victim?" The room went silent. Evan stared at his hands. "Sometimes." The facilitator waited. "What do you think about?" Evan's voice was barely audible. "I think about how I didn't mean for it to happen, how everything went wrong so fast." The facilitator nodded slowly. "Do you think about Caleb? About who he was?" Evan hesitated. "I don't really know who he was." The facilitator leaned forward. "Then maybe you should learn." She handed him an assignment. Write a letter to the victim's family, not to send, just to write, to process. Evan took the paper back to his cell, stared at it for days, didn't write a word. How could he? What could he say? "Sorry I killed someone you loved?" It felt empty, meaningless, but the paper stayed on his bunk, a silent reminder, a question he couldn't answer. Who was Caleb Rourke, and why couldn't Evan bring himself to care? Dana finally visited Caleb's grave. It had been a year. She'd avoided it, couldn't face it. But one morning she woke up and knew she had to go. She drove to the cemetery, parked, walked slowly through the rows of headstones until she found it. Simple, gray granite, Caleb James Rourke, beloved son, forever missed. Dana knelt in the grass. She didn't bring flowers, didn't know what to bring. She just sat there. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I couldn't stop him. I'm sorry I brought him into your life. I'm sorry you tried so hard and it wasn't enough." She stayed for an hour, talking, crying, letting the grief pour out in a way she couldn't at home. When she finally stood to leave, she felt lighter, not healed, but less buried. Back in prison, Evan had his first real breakdown. It came without warning. He was in his cell, lying on his bunk, staring at the ceiling, and suddenly, the weight of it hit him. 28 years, minimum. He'd be in his 40s before he even had a chance at parole. His entire youth. Gone. His 20s, his 30s. Gone. He'd never go to college, never have a normal job, never have a family, never be free in the way he once was. The realization crushed him. He curled up on his side and cried. Quietly at first, then harder. His cellmate heard but didn't say anything. Just let him break, because everyone broke eventually. It was part of the process. When Evan finally stopped, his face was raw, his eyes swollen. But something had shifted. The denial was cracking, and beneath it, for the first time, was the faint outline of understanding. The weight of what remains was heavier than what was lost. 3 years into his sentence, Evan started writing. Not the letter the counselor assigned. Not apologies or explanations. Just thoughts, fragments, things he didn't understand about himself. He wrote about the night it happened, tried to piece together what he was thinking, what he was feeling. But the memory was slippery. He remembered anger, remembered Caleb's voice, remembered his mother's tears. But he couldn't remember the exact moment he decided to pull the trigger. It felt like it happened to someone else, like he was watching from outside his own body. The counselor called it dissociation, a way the brain protects itself from unbearable actions. Evan didn't know if that was true. He just knew he couldn't make sense of it. The other inmates started talking to him more, not because they liked him, but because time erodes silence. One guy, Marcus, serving 15 for assault, asked him one day in the yard, "You ever think about what you'd do different?" Evan shrugged. "All the time." Marcus nodded. "Yeah, me too. But thinking don't change nothing. You gotta live with it." Evan looked at him. "How?" Marcus leaned back against the fence. "You don't. Not really. You just get up every day and do the time. And maybe, if you're lucky, you figure out who you are without the thing you did. But most guys never get there. They just stay stuck." Evan didn't respond, but the words stayed with him. Stuck. That's exactly how he felt. Dana started attending a support group for families of incarcerated individuals. She almost didn't go. The shame was too heavy, but her therapist encouraged her. "You're not alone in this," the therapist said. "There are other parents going through the same thing." So Dana went. I sat in a church basement with 8 other people. Most were mothers, a few fathers, all carrying the same weight. One woman's son was in for drugs, another's for robbery, a man's daughter for fraud. When it was Dana's turn to share, her voice shook. "My son killed someone. His name is Evan. He's 16, was 16, and I don't know how to be his mother anymore." The group didn't judge, didn't offer empty comfort. They just listened. One woman reached over and squeezed her hand. "You're still his mother. That doesn't go away. But you get to decide what that means now." Dana nodded, tears streaming. After the meeting, a few people stayed to talk, shared their stories, their struggles. The holidays were the hardest, they said. Birthdays, anniversaries, days when the absence felt loudest. Dana felt less alone. Not better, but less alone. She started going every week. It became a lifeline, a place where she didn't have to pretend, didn't have to explain, just existed in the shared wreckage of broken families. Evan's mandatory therapy sessions became more intense. His counselor, Dr. Patel, was patient but firm. She didn't let him deflect, didn't let him hide behind "I don't know" or "it just happened." She pushed. "Evan, you made a choice. What were you feeling right before you made it?" Evan stared at the floor. "I felt like I had to win, like if I didn't do something, he'd always be there, always in my face, always making me feel small." Dr. Patel leaned forward. "So it wasn't about self-defense. It was about power." Evan's jaw tightened. "I guess?" Dr. Patel wrote something down. "That's the first honest thing you've said in months." The sessions after that were harder, more painful. Dr. Patel made him read articles about Caleb's life, about the foundation Renee started, about the scholarships given in his name. Made him see Caleb as a person, not just an obstacle. Evan hated it, hated seeing Caleb's face, hated reading about his hobbies, his friends, his mother's grief. It made the guilt unbearable. But Dr. Patel didn't let him look away. "You took a life, Evan. The least you can do is understand what that life was." Evan broke down in one session. "I can't fix it. I can't bring him back. So what's the point?" Dr. Patel's voice was gentle but unwavering. "The point is accountability. The point is becoming someone who wouldn't do it again." Dana made a decision, a painful one. She wrote a letter to Renee, not an excuse, not a defense, just an acknowledgement. "Dear Renee, I know there are no words that can undo what my son did. I know sorry isn't enough. But I need you to know that I think about Caleb every day. I think about the future he should have had, the life we should have built together. I failed him, I failed you, and I will carry that for the rest of my life. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that Caleb mattered to me, that he still matters. Sincerely, Dana." She sealed the envelope, drove to the post office, held it for 10 minutes before finally dropping it in the slot. Renee received the letter 2 weeks later. She held it in her hands, afraid to open it. Her sister was visiting. "What is it?" Renee showed her. Her sister frowned. "You don't have to read it." Renee nodded. "I know." But she opened it anyway, read it slowly. Tears came halfway through. When she finished, she set it down and stared out the window. Her sister asked, "What are you feeling?" Renee's voice was quiet. "I don't know. Part of me wants to tear it up. Part of me is glad she sent it. I don't forgive her. I can't. But I believe she's sorry. And maybe that's enough for now." She folded the letter carefully, put it in a drawer. She didn't respond, but she kept it. Evan turned 20, a milestone that felt hollow. He'd spent 4 years in prison, 4 years of the same walls, the same routine, the same faces. Some inmates celebrated birthdays, got cards from family, extra commissary. Evan got a phone call from his mother. It was brief, awkward. "Happy birthday, baby." Evan's voice was flat. "Thanks." Dana tried to fill the silence. "I'm thinking about you, always thinking about you." Evan didn't know what to say. "I know." The call ended after 3 minutes. Evan went back to his cell, sat on his bunk, and for the first time in years he let himself cry. Not for Caleb, not for his mother, for himself, for the life he'd destroyed, for the boy he used to be, for the man he'd never become. Dr. Patel noticed the shift. "You're grieving," she said in their next session. Evan nodded. "I guess." Dr. Patel handed him a tissue. "That's progress. You can't heal what you don't mourn." Evan wiped his eyes. "I don't deserve to heal." Dr. Patel's expression was serious. "Maybe not, but you deserve to try. Not for you, for the people you hurt, for the person you could still become. Healing isn't about feeling better, it's about being better." Evan looked at her, really looked. "How do I do that?" Dr. Patel leaned back. "You start by telling the truth. To yourself, to the people you hurt. You stop hiding, stop pretending. You face what you did, and you spend the rest of your life proving you understand why it was wrong." Evan nodded slowly. It sounded impossible, but for the first time it also sounded necessary. When the mirror stops lying, the real work begins. 5 years became 7, 7 became 10. Time moved differently inside. Days dragged, weeks blurred, years vanished. Evan was 26 now, no longer the teenager who walked into the courtroom with a smirk. His face had changed, hardened, lines around his eyes from squinting under fluorescent lights, a scar on his jaw from a fight he didn't start but couldn't avoid. His body had changed too, broader shoulders, heavier build. Prison had a way of aging people faster, not just physically, emotionally. He'd seen things, heard things, lived through things he never thought he'd experience, and each one carved away another piece of the person he used to be. He worked in the prison library now, shelving books, helping inmates with literacy programs. It wasn't glamorous, but it was quiet, and Evan had learned to value quiet. He read more than he ever did in school: novels, biographies, philosophy, anything that let him escape the four walls for a few hours. One book stayed with him, a memoir by a man who'd served 30 years for murder. The man wrote about redemption, not as forgiveness, but as transformation. You don't erase the harm, the author wrote. You carry it, and you use the weight to build something better. Evan underlined that sentence, read it over and over, tried to believe it was possible. Dana's life had settled into a new normal. She still lived in Briar Glen, still worked as a nurse's aide, still attended her support group. But she'd stopped visiting Evan. The last visit had been 3 years ago. It was too hard, seeing him behind glass, talking through a phone, pretending things could be okay. They both knew they couldn't. So she stopped, sent letters instead, short ones, updates about her life, stories about work, nothing deep, nothing that required a response. Evan wrote back sometimes, usually just a few lines. Thanks for the update. I'm doing okay. Love, Evan. The word love felt strange, obligatory, but they both kept writing it, because letting go completely felt like another kind of death. Renee's foundation had grown. What started as a small nonprofit now operated in 3 states. They provided counseling for blended families, conflict resolution training for teens, support groups for victims of domestic violence. Caleb's name was attached to every program. His photo hung in the office. His story was told at every fundraiser. Renee had turned her grief into purpose. But the cost was high. She barely slept, worked 70-hour weeks. Her health suffered. Her sister finally intervened. "You're going to kill yourself?" Renee's response was sharp. "At least I'd be doing something that matters." Her sister grabbed her hand. "You matter, not just the work. You." Renee broke down, let herself be held, admitted she was tired. So tired. Evan applied for a college correspondence program. The prison offered limited options. But he qualified for a certificate in social sciences. It felt ironic, studying human behavior when he'd failed so catastrophically at understanding his own. But he needed something, a goal, a direction. He wrote essays about trauma, about adolescence, about the criminal justice system. His professors didn't know his story, just saw his work. One wrote on an assignment, "You have real insight here. Keep pushing." Evan stared at the comment for a long time. Insight. He'd never thought of himself as insightful, just broken. But maybe broken people could see cracks others missed. Maybe that was worth something. Marcus, the inmate who'd talked to Evan years ago, was released. Parole after serving 12 years. The day he left, he found Evan in the yard. "You gonna be all right?" Evan nodded. "Yeah. I think so." Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. "Listen, I know you got a long road ahead, but don't waste it. Don't just do time. Use it. Figure out who you are, who you want to be, because when you get out, nobody's going to care about your excuses. They're going to care about what you do next." Evan watched him walk toward the gate, watched him step into the outside world, felt a strange mix of hope and envy. Hope that freedom was possible. Envy that it wasn't his turn yet. Dr. Patel retired. Her replacement was younger, less patient. Evan missed the sessions with Dr. Patel. She'd pushed him, but she'd also believed in him. The new counselor treated him like a checklist. "How are you feeling? Any issues this week?" "Okay, see you next month." Evan stopped opening up, went back to short answers. Fine. No, everything's okay. It was easier that way, less exhausting, but he also felt the progress stalling. The work he'd done with Dr. Patel started to fade. He caught himself slipping back into old patterns, blaming others, minimizing his actions. He recognized it. That was new. But recognition didn't mean change. Change required effort he didn't always have. Dana got a call one night. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. It was Renee. Dana's heart stopped. "Hello?" Renee's voice was calm, even. "Dana, it's Renee Rourke." Dana sat down hard. I didn't expect to hear from you." Renee paused. "I got your letter. Years ago, I never responded. I didn't know what to say." Dana's voice shook. "You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know." Renee took a breath. "I'm calling because I've been thinking about forgiveness, about what it means, and I don't forgive you. I don't forgive Evan, but I don't want to carry this hatred anymore. It's killing me." Dana started crying. "I understand." Renee's voice softened. "I'm not calling to be friends. I'm calling to let go. For me, not for you. Do you understand?" Dana nodded, even though Renee couldn't see. "Yes, I understand, and thank you for calling, for telling me." The call ended. Both women sat in silence, on opposite sides of town, carrying different weights, but both a little lighter than before. Evan wrote the letter, the one Dr. Patel had assigned years ago. He'd avoided it for so long. But something about turning 26 made him face it. He wrote to Caleb's family, not to send, just to write. "Dear Rourke family, I don't know how to start this. I've tried 100 times. Every version feels wrong, because nothing I say can change what I did. Nothing I say can bring Caleb back. I killed him. I took your son, your brother, your friend. And I did it because I was angry, because I wanted control, because I was selfish and cruel and stupid. I've spent 10 years trying to understand why. And the truth is, there is no why that makes it okay. I was 16, but I knew right from wrong. I knew what a gun could do. I knew Caleb wasn't a threat. He was just in my way, and I removed him like he didn't matter. But he did matter. I know that now. I've read about him, about the foundation, about the lives he touched. And I hate myself for what I took from the world. From you. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I see him now. I see what I did, and I'll carry it for the rest of my life. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Evan Mercer." He folded the letter, put it in a box under his bunk. Never sent it, but writing it changed something. The mirror had stopped lying, and the reflection was unbearable, but it was real. Time doesn't heal, it teaches. Evan's case resurfaced online years after the trial. A true crime podcast picked it up, spent 6 episodes dissecting every detail. The hosts analyzed the evidence, played audio from the trial, interviewed legal experts. They didn't interview Dana, didn't interview Renee, just talked about them, talked about Evan, turned the tragedy into entertainment, millions of downloads, thousands of comments. People who'd never heard of Briar Glen suddenly had opinions. He should rot. He was just a kid. The system failed him. The system did its job. The debate raged in digital spaces, anonymous voices arguing over a life they didn't live, a pain they didn't feel. Inside prison, Evan heard about it. An inmate's visitor mentioned the podcast. Word spread. Some inmates listened, asked Evan questions. "Is it true you checked the street? Did your mom really testify against you?" Evan stopped answering, stopped engaging. The attention made him feel exposed, like a specimen under glass. He'd spent years trying to become more than the worst thing he'd ever done. And now strangers were repackaging that worst thing, making it viral, making it consumable. He wrote to Dana. "Did you hear about the podcast?" Dana wrote back. "Yes, I'm not listening. I lived it. I don't need to hear someone else tell me what it was." Evan understood. He didn't listen either, but the podcast had consequences. Renee started getting messages. People found her foundation's website, found her email. Some were supportive, some were cruel. Your son probably deserved it. You're just milking his death for money. The attacks were baseless, vicious. Renee tried to ignore them, but they accumulated, weighed on her. Her sister reported the worst ones, got accounts suspended, but new ones always appeared. This is what happens, her sister said. When people treat pain like content, they forget there are real people on the other side. Renee nodded, tried to focus on the work, but the wound had been reopened, and it bled fresh. Dana lost her job, not officially because of the podcast, but the timing was suspicious. Or her supervisor said they were restructuring, that her position was redundant. But Dana knew people at work had been listening, whispering, looking at her differently. She was the mother of a killer, and even 10 years later, that label followed her. She applied for other jobs, got interviews. But when background checks came back, the offers disappeared. Her son's name was attached to hers, forever. She finally found work at a small clinic an hour away, paid less, longer commute. But they didn't ask questions, didn't care about her past. She was grateful, took the job, started over, again. Evan's parole eligibility was still 18 years away, but the prison offered a restorative justice program. Voluntary, intense. It involved meeting with victims' families, not his own case, but others, hearing their pain, offering accountability, learning to sit with the harm he'd caused without defending himself. Evan signed up. The first session was brutal. A woman whose brother was killed in a robbery confronted the inmates. You think you're the only one suffering? You think prison is the worst part? Try living every day knowing your person is gone. Try explaining to a 5-year-old why daddy isn't coming home. Try that. Then tell me about your suffering. Evan sat silent, tears streaming, couldn't speak, couldn't move, just absorbed the weight. The program forced him to write impact statements, not about what he felt, about what he'd done to others. He wrote about Dana. I destroyed my mother's life. I made her choose between truth and loyalty. I put her in a courtroom and made her testify against her own son. I took the man she loved. I didn't just kill Caleb. I killed her chance at happiness, at stability, at peace. She'll carry my crime for the rest of her life, and I did that to her. He wrote about Renee. I took her son, the person she raised, the person she loved. I didn't just take his life. I took her future, her hope, her sense of safety. I turned her world into a nightmare, and I did it because I was angry about a curfew. That's the truth. A man is dead because I didn't want rules. The facilitator read Evan's statements aloud to the group, asked others to reflect. One inmate said, "That's real. That's accountability." Another said, "You can't undo it, but you can own it, and that's something." Evan didn't feel better, didn't feel cleansed. He just felt the full weight of what he'd done, and it was crushing. But the facilitator said that was the point. You're supposed to feel it. That's how you make sure you never do it again. Evan nodded, understood. This wasn't about feeling better. It was about being better. And better started with the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Dana attended a panel discussion at a local university. The topic was families of offenders. She almost canceled, but something pushed her to go. She sat on a stage with 4 other parents, all with children in prison, all carrying impossible shame. The moderator asked, "How do you reconcile love with accountability?" Dana spoke, voice shaking but steady. I love my son, I always will, but I also know what he did was unforgivable, and those 2 truths live in me every day. I don't reconcile them, I just carry them, both of them, because that's what it means to be his mother. I don't get to choose the easy parts. The room was silent. Then someone in the audience started clapping, then others, not because Dana had answers, but because she'd told the truth. After the panel, a young woman approached Dana, maybe 25, nervous. "My brother is in prison for assault, and I don't know how to talk to my parents about it. They act like he doesn't exist, like pretending makes it easier. Dana took her hand. It doesn't. Pretending just buries the pain. You have to name it, acknowledge it, and then decide what kind of relationship you can have. It won't be the same, but it can still be something. If you want it to be. The woman cried, hugged Dana. Thank you. Dana hugged her back, and for the first time in years, she felt useful. Like her pain had a purpose. Not a happy purpose, but a real one. Evan turned 28, 2 years from 30, a decade in prison. He looked at himself in the small metal mirror in his cell. Didn't recognize the face staring back. Older, harder, scarred, but also different in a way he couldn't name. He wasn't the boy who killed Caleb, but he also wasn't free of that boy. He was something in between. A man shaped by a terrible choice, trying to build something from the ruins. He didn't know if redemption was possible, didn't know if he deserved it. But he knew he had to try, not for himself, for Dana, for Renee, for Caleb, for the memory of the life he took. He wrote in his journal that night, I can't bring him back. I can't fix what I broke, but I can make sure I never break anything again. That's all I have, and maybe that's enough. The boy who became a name was learning, slowly, to become a person again. Caleb's Foundation celebrated its 15th anniversary. 15 years since Renee turned her grief into action. The event was held in a community center in Briar Glen, the same town where it all happened, where Caleb died, where Evan was arrested, where lives shattered and tried to rebuild. Over 200 people attended, families helped by the programs, donors, volunteers, advocates. The walls were covered with photos. Caleb as a child, as a teenager, as an adult, smiling, working, living. Each image a reminder that he was more than a victim. He was a person, a son, a human being who deserved to be remembered for more than how he died. Renee gave a speech. Her voice was strong, steady, the kind of strength that comes from surviving what should have destroyed you. 15 years ago, I lost my son, and in that loss, I had a choice. I could let the grief consume me, or I could turn it into something that mattered. I chose the second, not because I'm strong, but because Caleb was, and he would have wanted his life to mean something. So we built this, a foundation that helps families in crisis, that teaches young people how to resolve conflict without violence, that honors Caleb by preventing others from experiencing what we did. The room erupted in applause. Renee smiled, a tired smile, but real. Dana watched the speech online. The foundation posted it on their website. She didn't attend. Couldn't. It wouldn't be fair to Renee. Wouldn't be fair to Caleb's memory. But she watched, cried through the whole thing. She donated, anonymously, every year on the anniversary of Caleb's death. It wasn't much, just what she could afford. But it felt important, like a way to honor him, to acknowledge the debt she could never repay. She didn't tell Evan, didn't tell anyone. It was private, personal, a quiet act of penance in a loud world of judgment. Evan was granted a small privilege, a tablet with restricted internet access, educational content only, no social media, no news sites. But he could read articles, watch documentaries, take online courses. He used it to learn about restorative justice, about trauma, about the psychology of violence. He wasn't trying to excuse what he did. He was trying to understand it, understand himself. One night he found an article written by a formerly incarcerated person. The man wrote about legacy. You don't get to choose what people remember about you, but you do get to choose what you do with the time you have left. Make it count. Not for applause, for the people you hurt. Evan saved the article, read it every time he felt himself slipping into self-pity. The parole system sent a notice. Evan's first parole hearing would be in 16 years. He'd be 44, middle-aged, a lifetime away from the 16-year-old who stepped onto a porch and checked for witnesses. The letter outlined what he'd need: evidence of rehabilitation, completion of programs, statements of remorse, support from family, a re-entry plan. Evan stared at the list. It felt impossible, overwhelming, but also concrete, real. For the first time, freedom wasn't just a concept. It was a checklist, a series of steps. He could take steps. He'd been doing it for 12 years already. He wrote back, requested information on additional programs, started planning, not with hope, but with intention. Dana was diagnosed with high blood pressure, stress-related. The doctor told her to slow down, take care of herself. She laughed bitterly. How do you slow down when your life is just waiting? The doctor didn't have an answer. Prescribed medication, suggested therapy. Dana was already in therapy, had been for years. It helped, but it didn't erase the fact that she was living in limbo. Her son was in prison. The man she loved was dead, and she was stuck in between, aging, tired, carrying a weight that never got lighter. She started painting, something her therapist suggested. She wasn't good at it, but it didn't matter. The act of creating something helped, gave her control over something, even if it was just color on canvas. One of her paintings was abstract, dark blues and grays with streaks of red. She didn't plan it, just let the brush move. When she stepped back, she saw it. The living room, the night it happened, the colors of grief and violence. She almost destroyed it, but didn't. Hung it in her bedroom where no one else would see. A private memorial, a way to hold the pain without letting it consume her. Her sister saw it once. That's intense, Dana nodded. It's honest. Her sister hugged her, didn't say anything else, because sometimes there were no words, just presence. Evan received a letter, not from Dana, not from a lawyer, from a college professor, someone who'd read his essays in the correspondence program. Dear Evan, I've been teaching for 20 years. I've read thousands of essays. Yours stood out, not because of the writing, though it's solid, but because of the honesty, the willingness to sit in discomfort. I don't know your story, but I can tell you're doing the work. Keep going. The world needs people who are willing to face their own darkness and still choose the light. Best, Dr. Martin Hayes. Evan read it 5 times, folded it carefully, put it in his box with the unsent letter to Caleb's family. He didn't know Dr. Hayes, didn't know why the man took the time to write, but it mattered. Someone saw him as more than a case number, more than a headline. Someone saw potential. The True Crime Podcast released a follow-up episode. Where Are They Now? They covered Evan's life in prison, Dana's quiet existence, Renee's foundation. The hosts were respectful this time, less sensational, more thoughtful. They interviewed a criminologist about juvenile offenders, about brain development, about the possibility of change. And the episode ended with a question. Can someone who commits murder as a teenager ever truly be redeemed? Or is some harm too great to move past? They didn't answer, just left it hanging. The comment section exploded again. People argued, debated, judged. But a few comments were different. I hope he's changed. I hope he's learning. I hope Caleb's family finds peace. Those comments were quieter, but they were there. Proof that even in the noise, some people still believed in the possibility of growth. Evan wrote in his journal that night, I don't know if I'll ever be redeemed. I don't know if I deserve to be. But I know I'm not the same person I was. I can't fix what I did. Can't undo it. But I can make sure the rest of my life means something. Not to erase the harm, but to honor the people I hurt by becoming someone who would never hurt anyone again. That's my legacy, not the crime, the response, the work, the change. I don't know if it's enough, but it's all I have. He closed the journal, lay on his bunk, stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow he'd wake up and do the work again, and the day after, and the day after that, because that's what survival looked like. Not happiness, not peace, just persistence. One day at a time. What survives the wreckage isn't the person you were. It's the person you fight to become. 18 years after the sentencing, Evan stood before the parole board. He was 44 years old now, gray streaks in his hair, lines carved deep around his eyes and mouth. The uniform he wore was the same navy blue he'd been issued nearly 2 decades ago. All but the man wearing it was entirely different. The boy who'd smirked in a courtroom was gone. The teenager who'd checked the street for witnesses had been replaced by someone quieter, humbler, broken in ways that couldn't be hidden, but also rebuilt, piece by piece, year by year. He sat at a table across from 5 board members, hands folded, waiting. The chairperson, a woman in her 60s with wire-rimmed glasses, opened the file. Evan's entire life reduced to paper. Crime summary, disciplinary record, program completion certificates, letters of support, psychological evaluations. She read silently for a moment, then looked up. "Mr. Mercer, you've been incarcerated for 18 years. You were 16 when you committed the crime. You're 44 now. Tell us, in your own words, why you believe you should be granted parole." Evan took a breath. He'd practiced this moment in his mind 1,000 times. But now that it was here, the words felt heavier than he expected. "I don't believe I deserve parole," Evan began. His voice was steady but quiet. "I don't think I've earned it in the way someone earns a reward, but I do believe I've changed. I was 16 when I killed Caleb Rourke, and for a long time I told myself it was an accident, that I was scared, that I didn't mean it. But those were lies. I was angry. I was entitled. I wanted control. And when Caleb stood in the way of that, I removed him. I took a gun. I aimed it. I pulled the trigger, and then I checked the street to see if anyone was watching. That's who I was. I was someone who cared more about getting caught than about the man dying on the floor." He paused. The room was silent. One board member scribbled notes. Another watched him carefully. Evan continued. "I've spent 18 years trying to understand how I became that person, and trying to make sure I never become him again. I've completed every program offered: anger management, victim impact, restorative justice. I earned a degree. I've worked in the library helping other inmates learn to read, not because I thought it would look good for parole, but because I needed to do something that mattered, something that wasn't about me." His voice cracked slightly. "I can't bring Caleb back. I can't undo what I did to his family, to my mother, to everyone who loved him. But I can make sure the rest of my life stands for something other than that one terrible act." The chairperson leaned forward. "Mr. Mercer, you've had minimal disciplinary issues. Your record shows genuine engagement, but I need to ask, if you were released, what would you do? Where would you go? How would you ensure you're not a risk to society?" Evan nodded. He'd prepared for this. "I have a re-entry plan. I've been accepted into a halfway house in Columbus. I have a job lined up through a re-entry program. Warehouse work, nothing glamorous. But it's honest. I'll continue therapy, continue the work I've been doing. And if I'm allowed, I'd like to speak to at-risk youth, not to glorify what I did, but to show them what happens when anger turns into violence, to be a cautionary tale. If that's all my life becomes, that's enough." Another board member spoke, an older man with a stern expression. "What would you say to the victim's family if you could?" Evan's throat tightened. He'd thought about this question every day for 18 years. "I'd say I'm sorry, and I know that's not enough. I know sorry doesn't bring Caleb back, doesn't erase their pain, doesn't give them closure. But I'd tell them I see him now. I see who he was, what he meant, what I took. And I'd tell them that I've spent every day since trying to become someone who honors his memory by never causing that kind of harm again. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I hope they know I'm not the same person who took their son." The board deliberated for 3 hours. Evan was taken back to a holding cell. He sat on a bench, head in his hands, trying not to hope. Yes, trying not to imagine freedom. Because hope felt dangerous. It felt like something that could be taken away, like so much already had been. When the guard finally came to get him, Evan's heart hammered. He was brought back into the room. The board members were seated again. The chairperson's face was unreadable. "Mr. Mercer, this board has reviewed your case thoroughly. We've considered the severity of your crime, the age at which you committed it, your behavior during incarceration, and your current risk level." She paused. The silence stretched unbearably. "We've decided to grant parole, with conditions. You will reside in the approved halfway house for a minimum of 1 year. You will maintain employment. You will attend mandatory therapy. You will have no contact with the victim's family unless they initiate it. You will submit to random drug testing and electronic monitoring. Any violation of these terms will result in immediate revocation. Do you understand?" Evan's eyes filled with tears. He nodded, unable to speak. The chairperson's expression softened just slightly. "Mr. Mercer, this is not freedom. This is accountability. Use it wisely." Evan found his voice. "I will. Thank you. Thank you." Renee was notified of the parole decision. She sat in her office, staring at the letter. Her sister was with her. "How do you feel?" Renee's voice was hollow. "I don't know. Part of me is angry. Part of me expected it. He's been in for 18 years. He was a kid when it happened. The system says he's paid enough." Her sister squeezed her hand. "But you don't think he has?" Renee shook her head. "Caleb didn't get 18 years. He didn't get parole." He got nothing. So no, I don't think it's enough. But I also can't carry this anger forever. It's killing me. So maybe this is the universe telling me to let go. Not forgive. Just let go." She folded the letter, put it in a drawer with Dana's old letter, and went back to work. Because the foundation was still there. Caleb's legacy was still alive. And that mattered more than Evan Mercer's freedom. Dana received a call from Evan the day he was released. She almost didn't answer. Hadn't spoken to him in 5 years. But she did. His voice was different. Older. "Mom, I'm out." Dana's breath caught. "I know. I got the notice." There was a long pause. "I don't expect you to see me. I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know I'm going to do everything I can to make this mean something." Dana closed her eyes. Tears streamed down her face. "I hope you do, Evan. I really hope you do." Her voice broke. "I love you. I always will. But I can't be the mom I was. I can't pretend it didn't happen." Evan's voice was thick with emotion. "I know. I don't want you to. I just wanted to hear your voice." The call ended, both of them sitting alone, miles apart, connected by love and tragedy in equal measure. Evan stood outside the prison gates for the first time in 18 years. The air smelled different, felt different. He took a deep breath. The world was bigger than he remembered, louder, faster. A van waited to take him to the halfway house. He climbed in, looked back at the prison one last time. It had been his home, his hell, his classroom, the place where he'd learned what accountability really meant. He didn't feel joy, didn't feel relief. Just a quiet determination. He had work to do, a life to rebuild, not for applause, not for redemption, for the people he'd hurt, for the memory of Caleb Rourke, for the chance to prove that change, however painful, was possible. Years later, someone would ask Evan if he ever forgave himself. He'd shake his head. "No, and I don't think I should. Forgiveness isn't mine to give. I took a life. That doesn't get erased. But I can live in a way that honors what I took. I can be honest, be accountable, be useful. That's not redemption. It's just responsibility, and it's the only thing I have left to offer." He'd go on to work with youth intervention programs, not as a hero, as a warning, a living example of what happens when anger goes unchecked, when entitlement meets violence, when a teenager believes he's untouchable. He'd tell his story again and again, because if even one kid heard it and chose differently, then Caleb's death would mean something beyond tragedy. The doorbell camera that captured Evan that night still exists. In an evidence locker somewhere, preserved, a digital artifact of a moment that changed lives. 18 seconds of grainy footage that spoke louder than any testimony. It didn't capture Evan's thoughts, didn't show his heart, just his actions. And in the end, that's what mattered. Not what he intended, not what he felt, what he did. The camera didn't lie, didn't embellish, didn't forgive. It just recorded. And in that recording, the truth waited. Patient, undeniable, inevitable. Poetic justice delivered not by a person, but by a lens. A tiny, blinking witness that refused to look away. The truth was always waiting. On a quiet street in Briar Glen, are in the evidence files, in the hearts of those who loved Caleb. In the conscience Evan built piece by piece over 18 years. It waited through the trial, through the appeals, through the long, grinding years of incarceration. And when the time came, it spoke, not with anger, not with mercy, just with clarity. What happened that night was a choice, and choices have consequences. Evan Mercer made his choice at 16, and he would spend the rest of his life answering for it. Not because the system demanded it, but because he finally understood that accountability wasn't a punishment. It was a responsibility. One he'd carry until his last breath. The gavel fell years ago, but the echo never stopped.